Hello and welcome to the channel. As always, like the video, and if you enjoyed the story, leave a comment on if you would want more. This fan fiction was not created by me, but in the description there is a link to the fanfic so you can show your support to the creator and read along. Without any more delay, let's dive into the story.
Silence, screamed Sarutobi as he stood at the edge of balcony overlooking the stadium. The disappointment he felt at his people for their treatment of Jinchuriki seeping into his voice. His command was ignored by the civilians as they continued to try and find anything they could use as a weapon and get down to the arena so they could kill Gaara. Frowning at his orders being ignored, the aged Kage flared his chakra and unleashed massive amounts of killing intent on the civilians in the stands. That seemed to do the trick as everyone in the stands froze in fright as the feeling of certain once again covered the arena. The civilians and shinobi in attendance turned to source of the incredibly thick killing intent only to see their Hokage glaring at every last one of them. You should be ashamed of yourselves to treat a shinobi from an allied village in such a way simply because he carries a burden you do not understand is a disgrace to the village of Konoha. But Lord Hokage, we can't allow another demon spawn to taint our village. It was by the courage of us civilians that the QB spawn no longer taints our village, and it seems we'll have to take action once again to rid ourselves of another demon, screamed a courageous or foolish civilian. This seemed to knock the other civilians out of their fear-induced stupors, and they tried to once again get down to the arena to finish off another demon. It seems you don't have as much control over your villagers as you once, though. Sarutobi said it with a smirk as he watched the crowd continue to try and attack Gaara. I can see why Naruto decided to leave this pathetic place, unknown to A or his guards. The Hokage's frown immediately turned into a cunning smirk. If only you knew the truth, you ignorant excuse of a Kage, he thought before returning his attention to getting the crowd back under control. Rado, contact Tabiki and have him prepare his forces for any kind of attack. Knowing my former student, he wouldn't hesitate to use this kind of distraction to his advantage. Whispered the Hokage to his lone bodyguard who nodded and understanding quietly radioed the head of torture and interrogation to relay the orders. While his guard was handing out his orders, Sarutobi signaled one of the Umbu in the crowd to execute the civilian who spoke out against his orders. Nodding slightly in acknowledgement, the white-cloaked, wolf-masked Umbu vanished in a blur, only reappear behind the civilian that spoke and stab him in the neck with a kunai. The civilians froze when they saw this. They just couldn't believe that one of their own had just died at the hands of Konoha shinobi, an Umbu no less. As they stood there, staring at the lifeless corpse that was still standing, with the wolf-masked Umbu looking at them from over its shoulder, daring them to try something. Their attention was dragged from the corpse by the feeling of certain death once again enveloping the arena. Turning to the source, they once again saw the Hokage glaring at them. And for the first time in years, the civilians of Konoha saw what a true shinobi is. Someone who was willing to sacrifice everything for their village. Someone who had shouldered the burden to protect and defend them so they could lead their normal lives. Someone who wasn't afraid to remove any possible threat to them or to the village. All of you return to your seats so we can continue with the exam, ordered the Hokage in a voice that had not been heard since the end of the Third Great Shinobi War, a voice that demanded respect and showed the power he wielded, the voice of the god of shinobi. To stunned and scarred to argue, the civilians returned to their seats as the shinobi and kunoichi present remained at the ready, should anything else go astray. While all of this was going on, A, B, and Dodai were suppressing smirks at seeing the famed and feared god of shinobi being reborn. Konoha might just survive this thing after all. It looks like your plan is coming together, Naruto. Thought all three men before they returned their attention to the arena where Ganma had just called for the next match, now that the crowd was controlled. The disguised Kazekage, on the other hand, was frowning at this turn of events. With his secret weapon exposed, Konoha would be keeping a close on Gaara from now on and until he outside of Fire Country. Add in the fact that two of his new targets for the invasion were Jinchuriki and that they seemed to have a firm grasp of their Biju's chakra, and his original plan for leveling Konoha was slowly coming apart at the seams. Damn, Kumo. They are becoming a bigger threat than I anticipated, thought the false Kage with a snarl as he watched the next begin with Temari using her battle fan to blow Shikamaru into the far wall. With Team 20. Good work, Karui, said Naruto as he gave his red-haired team made a hug, before Yujito did the same. Everything is going exactly as planned. The shinobi are tensed and ready for anything thanks to the civilians. Even though it's unexpected, with the old man finally reclaiming his title as the god of shinobi, the chances of the plan succeeding during the invasion just doubled. True, but what about the final part of the plan? With the old man back to his true self, won't that make things a little more complicated? Asked Karui as she leaned on the railing next to her team mates to watch the match. Yujito nodded in agreement from her place on the railing as she watched the match over her shoulder. Karui's right, Naruto-kun. With the old monkey acting like a Kage again, it complicates things for us, she said as she turned her attention to her team. From the corner of her eye, however, she caught Hinata glaring at her with all the hatred she could muster. Smirking at the arrogant heiress, Yujito got off of the railing and leaned into Naruto's right side as his arm instinctively wrapped around her waist. Her smirk turning feral, Yujito watched as Hinata activated her Byakugan, attempting to make her glare even more deadly than it already was, before turning her attention back to her boyfriend, who was watching the match with a critical eye. No, it doesn't, said Naruto, earning surprised looks from his team. Normally that would pose a problem, but not in this instance. You see, the old man still thinks I'm working for Konoha, and he still believes I see him as a grandfather figure. That's his weakness, and that's what will cost him dearly. When we play our final card, the emotional pain that it will cause for him will be more than enough to allow us time to make our escape. Nodding and understanding, the two Kunoichi of Team 20 returned their attention to the match at hand, and had to resist the urge to sweat drop as the lazy Nara forfeited the match, even though he had Temari caught with a shadow. Typical Nara, sighed the three Kumo ninja before they adopted serious looks as Shikamaru and Temari left the field. It's time, don't hold back, Yujito-chan. Do whatever it takes to eliminate her. Right, Naruto-kun? I'll do what I can, said the Nibi Jinchuriki as she prepared herself for the match that was about to begin. With Genma. Now for the final first round match. Will Hinata, Hyuga, and Yujito ni please come down, said Genma as a very pissed off Hyuga heiress jumped down from the competitor's box. Yujito, on the other hand, took her time and gave her boyfriend a quick kiss before jumping over the railing and landing in front of Genma and across from Hinata. Said Special Jounin was currently sweating bullets as he slowly tried to back away from Hinata, who was doing her best to cause Yujito to internally combust with her glare alone. Smirking at her opponent's reaction, Yujito turned towards the competitor's box and blew another kiss at her boyfriend, completely turning her back on Hinata. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. Hinata charged at Yujito's unguarded back with fury pouring off of her in waves. Rearing her right palm back, the enraged heiress unleashed a vicious juken strike aimed for the base of Yujito's spine. Spinning on her heel, Yujito swatted the palm strike away before continuing with her spin and delivering a vicious kick to the side of Hinata's head, sending her sprawling across the arena floor. Now that wasn't very nice. The proctor hadn't even started the match yet, said Yujito, in a scolding tone one would use when disciplining a child. Seeing that Hinata was shakily getting to her feet, Yujito turned to the scarred Genma before speaking in an innocent voice. I think it would be wise to start the match, proctor. Not needing to be told twice, Genma quickly went through the standard procedure to start the match before he shunshined to other side of the arena and out of harm's way, he hoped. Not wasting a second, Yujito charged at the wobbly Hinata with a kunai in hand. Thanks to her Byakugan, Hinata managed to jump to the side in time to avoid the lethal blade before she twisted in midair and kicked the blonde Jinchuriki away. Pathetic. Did you really think a straightforward attack would work against me, the heiress of the Hyuga clan? said Hinata with the classic superior Hyuga smirk. Her smirk was replaced with a frown when she saw Yujito getting up from her kick and smirking at her before disappearing in a puff of smoke. What? How did she make a solid clone? Before she could even start looking around for her opponent, a familiar voice she despised sounded from behind her. Fire style, fireball jutsu. Hinata managed to turn around just in time to be consumed by the unforgiving fireball. Yujito stepped out from the shadows. She was hiding in and watched the flames of her jutsu burn the area that her opponent had been. Suddenly, the flames of her technique dispersed to reveal a spinning dome of chakra with Hinata in the center. Slowly, the dome of chakra began to fall as Hinata slowed down, spinning on her heel. Taking advantage of the blatant opening, Yujito charged in and delivered a spinning roundhouse straight to Hinata's face, sending her tumbling to the other side of the arena, near Ginma. Slowly getting to her feet, Hinata glared at Yujito's relaxed form along with every member of the Hyuga clan that was present in the audience. "Ow," said Hinata as she got her footing back. "How did you get through the rotation? It is the ultimate defense jutsu." Yujito cocked an eyebrow at this, while waving her hand in a defensive manner. "Ultimate defense jutsu. Yeah, right," she said with a snort, earning her even harsher glares from the Hyugas present. "Your so-called ultimate defense is probably the weakest and most ineffective defensive technique I've seen. Sure, it can deflect an attack, but when you end the technique, you're left completely open to attack, as I've demonstrated." The Nibi Jinchuriki said with a smirk, causing Hinata to turn red with fury, not to mention that when you're using the technique, you can't even keep track of your opponent, dojutsu or not. No one can keep track of anything while spinning at the speeds your ultimate defense requires. An eerie silence fell over the arena as everyone, civilians and shinobi alike, could do little more than stare open-mouthed at the blonde Jinchuriki. Everyone in the village knew of the Hyuga clan's ultimate defense technique, and that no one alive had ever been able to get through the defense to injure the Hyuga using it, until today. They couldn't believe some foreigner had just come along and not only gotten through the Hyuga defense, but also made the Hyuga clan appear as fools in front of everyone. The silence was ended when the arena was filled with massive amounts of killing intent, all of it coming from the Hyuga section of the stands. With Hayashi Hyuga. How dare that insignificant whore insult the power of the Hyuga clan and the Byakugan? Hinata, if you do not manage to kill this urchin by the end of the match, I will take matters into my own hands, thought an enraged Hyuga clan head as he, along with every member of the main house present, glared at Yujito with their Byakugans blazing. In the arena. "You bitch, you'll pay for insulting the Hyuga clan," screamed Hinata as she charged at Yujito, fully intent on obliterating her from existence. Smirking at the enraged heiress, Yujito quickly went through a couple of hand signs before finishing in the tiger sign. Fire style, Phoenix Flower Jutsu. Bringing her right hand to her mouth, Yujito launched multiple small fireballs at the charging heiress. Channeling chakra into her hand, Hinata swatted the first of the fireballs away, only to receive a cut on the back of her hand courtesy of the shuriken hidden inside of the flames. Shuriken, thought Hinata in surprise before she quickly changed tactics and started weaving in and out of the fireballs and continued her charge towards the Kumo Kunoichi. So she wants a taijutsu match. Fine by me, thought Yujito as Hinata finally closed the distance between them and unleashed a barrage of juken strikes at her. Dodging one of the strikes, Yujito sent a quick punch towards Hinata's stomach, only to have it blocked by Hinata's open palm. Acting on instinct, Yujito quickly grabbed onto the wrist of the hand that blocked her punch and used it as leverage to pull her opponent into a crushing knee to the abdomen. Jumping away slightly, Hinata gasped for air before falling into the opening stance for one of the signature Hyuga techniques. 8 trigrams, 64 palms, she said before she unleashed the technique onto the waiting Yujito. 2 palm. Her 2 strikes were easily dodged and countered by a kick to the head. Ducking under the kick, Hinata continued with her attack. For palm, Again, her strikes were dodged or blocked, and she was forced to dodge a counterattack. 8 palm, 16 palm, 32 palm, completely blinded by rage that all of her strikes were dodged or blocked as if they were nothing. Hinata entered the final set for her technique, 64 palm. As she watched the Kumo Kunoichi continue to dodge her strikes with ease, Hinata did something that hadn't been done by a Hyuga in generations. She altered her technique's attack pattern. As she was nearing the end of her technique, Hinata subtly reached out with her foot and kicked Yujito's feet out from under her. Taking advantage of her opponent's loss of balance, Hinata quickly sent the last strike in her technique towards Yujito's unguarded throat, intent on ending the match by killing her opponent. However, instead of feeling her opponent's windpipe shatter under her fingers like she expected, the Hyuga heiress was suddenly let out a scream of pain as her entire body was filled with electrical energy. The Yujito in front of her vanished in a shower of sparks, revealing it to be a lightning clone, as the real Yujito appeared from behind Gunma before going through some more hand signs. Lightning style, raising lightning jutsu, she said as the ground around Hinata began to shake slightly before multiple lightning bolts burst through the earth in random locations. Hinata, despite her slightly paralyzed state, dodged most of the lightning bolts that erupted around her and attempted to move towards her unmoving opponent in hopes of getting in close again. Her hopes were shattered, though, as a bolt of lightning erupted from directly beneath her and pierced through her left leg as if it were butter. An ear-piercing scream escaped from Hinata as she fell to the ground, holding her now blackened leg. "Looks like this match is over," said Yujito, as she unsheathed her wakizashi and held it in the reverse grip before charging at the prone heiress. With Hayashi Hyuga, "We cannot allow this continue. It is time this whore learned her place," thought Hayashi before he and several other members of the main house vanished in blurs. With Naruto. "That a girl," said Naruto as he watched his girlfriend incapacitate her opponent before moving in to finish her off. Turning to Karui, Naruto noticed several blurs heading towards the two battling Kunoichi, Yujito, to be specific. "Shit, come on Karui," said Naruto in a rush before he jumped over the railing with Karui not far behind before turning toward the stands. "Sensei, we need you." A blur vanishing from the stands was the only reply he got before the three Kumo ninja intercepted the group, heading towards Yujito and Hinata. An eerie silence once again spread over the arena as the spectators watched the standoff taking place in the arena with bated breath. Team 20 stood across from Hayashi Hyuga and 5 other members of the Hyuga main house with looks of absolute rage. Their Hyuga counterparts glared back with equal rage as the tension in the air kept building. Nobody moved, nobody breathed for what felt like an eternity before Naruto broke the silence with a tone that sent a shiver up the spines of even the most veteran shinobi present. "What do you think you're doing interfering with this match?" he asked as he tightened the grip at his ninjato in case things came to a head. It was Hayashi that answered, his voice both angry and arrogant at the same time. "Who are you to question the will of the Hyuga clan?" he said with a glare at the blonde boy. "This lowly whore tried to kill the heiress of our clan. By law, we have a right to take whatever action necessary to remove any threat to our clan. Now stand aside and let us to put that worthless waste of life in her place for you. After all, you are from a powerful clan yourself. Why would you care what happens to this piece of filth?" The temperature in the arena plummeted as Hayashi finished speaking. Everyone who had been present at the Battle of the Great Naruto Bridge immediately knew what was coming, while every Kumo ninja present and Naruto's siblings all had one thought run through their heads when they heard what Hayashi had said. "Oh fuck." Naruto's body erupted in red chakra as he glared at the Hyuga clan head with blazing crimson red, slitted eyes. The fox head on his ninjato slowly started to open as Naruto's anger and killing intent kept rising. Acting quickly, Darui and Karui moved to block Naruto's path, while keeping an eye on the Hyuga clan members who were covering their eyes in pain from looking at all of the chakra Naruto was unleashing. Yujito grabbed onto the front of her boyfriend's cloak before bringing his face to hers and engaging in a kiss that definitely wasn't appropriate in public. Kagebox. Hayashi, you fool. Naruto may be working for Konoha as a spy, but Kumo will gladly declare war on us if anything were to happen to their ninja outside of the exams. Thought a furious Hiruzen Sarutobi as he glared down at the form of the head of the Hyuga clan. He not only risked war with his little stunt, but also risked us losing Naruto and all of the information and jutsu he would be bringing us. The aged Hokage took a glance at the Reikage next to him and was completely shocked at what he saw. Instead of being furious and shouting out demands for such an outrage, the young Reikage merely smirked at the scene playing out before them with a bit of blood leaking from his nose as he watched the two blondes continue to kiss. Shaking his head at what he saw, Sarutobi stood up and walked to the edge of the balcony before shouting in a chakra-enhanced voice. Due to the interference of the Hyuga clan, Hinata Hyuga is hereby disqualified from the tournament. The winner of the match is Yujito Ni, he said, while forcing the blonde slut's name past his lips as he tried not to choke on his own vomit at having declared the Kumo slut the winner of the match over the person he believed Naruto should truly be with. In the arena, Yujito pulled away from kissing her boyfriend when she heard the Hokage speak and had to suppress a smirk at the looks of rage on the faces of every Hyuga clan member present. Grabbing Naruto by the arm, she quickly led him back towards the competitor's box with Karui following behind. Darui sighed as he watched his students return to the competitor's box and glared at the retreating backs of the Hyuga clan members as Hinata was carried away by the medics before he shunshined back to his seat in the stands. Well, that went well, said Kakashi with an eye smile, as the rest of the former Konoha Jounin all looked at him like he was crazy. Well, you think that went well? A second longer, and the arena would have become a war zone between the Hyuga and Naruto's team. How can you say that went well? Screamed Anko as she took a deep breath while glaring at the cycloptic Jounin. Guy, Kurenai, and Hate were thinking the same thing, though they refrained from glaring at Kakashi as they knew he had to have a reason. Said Jounin just pulled out his favorite orange book, causing Anko to glare at him even harder and earning a slight glare from Kurenai as well. It went well, because the last time I saw someone insult or threaten Yujito like that in front of Naruto, he went on a rampage and killed hundreds of thugs and bandits in a matter of seconds, Kakashi said in a casual tone, as if talking about the weather. This stunned the remaining four Jounin, as this was the first they had heard the disastrous mission their fellow Jounin had taken his Genin team on. Turning to Darui, for pairs of eyes silently probed for any kind of confirmation to what Kakashi had said. It's true, Naruto is more protective of Yujito than Kakashi is of his books, he said with a shrug since he had come to accept that Naruto would go to any lengths to protect Yujito. For pairs of eyes widened as they turned to look at their little brother being calmed down by his teammates, each thinking along the same lines. Note to self, when Naruto's pissed get Yujito. In the arena, Gama was doing his best to shake off of the shock at nearly being caught in the crossfire of the Kumo team and the Hyuga clan. Finally, composing himself, he turned to the crowd before speaking, his voice still holding a bit of shock in it. That concludes the first round of matches. The next matches will be Naruto Namikaze versus Sasuke Uchiha, followed by Gaara of the Desert versus Temari of the Desert, and Yujito Ni will proceed straight to the finals. We will have a short intermission to allow our competitors time to recuperate from their matches. We will resume in 10 minutes' time. After 10 minutes of the tension growing for the Genin competing and one calmer Naruto later, Genma quieted the crowd down and began the second round of the tournament. The first match of the second round, Naruto Namikaze versus Sasuke Uchiha. Will the two of you please come down? Sasuke wasted no time and jumped over the railing, landing in front of Genma with his usual Uchiha scowl as he glared up at the still shirtless Naruto. Said blonde merely smirked at him before giving his girlfriend a quick kiss and high-fiving Karui before jumping over the rail and landing across from the world's biggest emo. Well, I was wondering when you and I would finally get a chance to have that rematch of ours, said Naruto with his patented fox smirk etched on his face. Sasuke's glare only intensified at that comment, drawing a chuckle from the shirtless blonde. What? You're still not sour about that spar in Wave Country, are you? Onyx's eyes bled to the crimson red of the Sharingan, with two Tomo in each eye as Sasuke started going through hand signs. Gama barely had time to start the match and jump out of the way before the Uchiha launched a fireball at our favorite blonde. Sasuke smirked when he saw the fireball impact with Naruto and start to burn the surrounding area. His smirk vanished when the fireball suddenly split down the middle and the flames dispersed to reveal Naruto with his ninjato held in his right hand and looking as if nothing happened. Is that all you got, Uchiha? I expected more from the so-called last Uchiha. Oh wait, you're not the last Uchiha alive, are you? Said Naruto as his smirk grew when he saw Sasuke's eye darken with uncontrolled rage. Your brother Itachi is still alive, isn't he? Shut up. Once I kill you, I'll find that murderer and kill him to screamed Sasuke as he started going through hand signs again, fire style. Phoenix Flower Jutsu. Bringing his hand to his mouth, he launched well over 24 small fireball at the unmoving blonde. Sheathing his ninjato, Naruto quickly went through a few hand signs before bringing his right hand to his lips. Wind style, great breakthrough, he said before launching a huge gust of wind that extinguished the flames, revealing the shuriken hidden inside. Predictable, he said before going through a few more. Hand signs before ending in the snake sign. Earth style, earth wall jutsu. Leaning back, Naruto lurched forward and spit out a stream of mud from his mouth that grew and hardened into a wall blocking the shuriken from reaching their target. Jumping up to the top of his wall, Naruto smirked at the look of rage and confusion on Sasuke's face. Surprised you couldn't copy my jutsu, Uchiha? Said Naruto, shocking everyone in the audience that someone had managed to prevent the legendary Sharingan from copying their techniques. It's rather simple, really. The Sharingan may have the power to copy any technique it sees, but that power is useless when the wielder is using a jutsu of their own. It's actually rather obvious and a major flaw in the Sharingan's abilities, since in order to copy a jutsu, the wielder must have enough chakra to activate the power. Silence once again descended over the arena as yet again. Another foreigner had just defeated and exposed a major flaw in one of the most powerful Kekkei Genkai in the village. No one was more surprised and angered that someone had pointed out a flaw in the Sharingan than Sasuke Uchiha. So mad was the last Uchiha that he completely forgot about the strategy he had come up with over the month break and jumped up onto the wall of the arena. Sharingan blazing. He went through 3 hand signs before cupping his left hand with his right. Everyone watched in shock as lightning started to gather in Sasuke's hand as he glared at the stunned blonde in the arena. With Naruto's siblings. Why that insolent little? Seethed Kakashi as he watched as his sorry excuse of student continued to gather lightning in his hand. Guy turned to his eternal rival with a serious expression on his normally carefree face. Kakashi, how did he manage to get that jutsu? He asked as he started his comrade with a questioning gaze. Everyone else turned their attention towards the copy nin, each wondering the exact same thing. Taking a deep breath to calm him some, the cycloptic Jounin turned to face his fellow Jounin and spoke in a tone of barely restrained anger. It must have been during the mission to Wave Country. Naruto and Sasuke finished their fight before Darui, and I did so. It's possible that Sasuke managed to copy the technique as I was preparing it to attack Zabuza. Darui nodded in agreement, as that was the most likely thing to happen, although that still raised a concern inside of the Kumo Jounin that he made known to everyone. Still, even if he had managed to copy the jutsu, the amount of training necessary to perform the jutsu could only be given by someone with a deep knowledge of lightning-based chakra. That raises the question, who could have trained the Uchiha to use the technique during the month-long break? This got some concerned looks from the former Konoha Jounin as they turned their attention back to the match. In the arena. That bastard, he stole Kakashi Nizin's original technique. You'll pay for that one Uchiha, thought Naruto in a fury as he watched Sasuke continue to prepare his attack. Kurama, it's time we tested out the first of your jutsu. About time, Kit. I've been itching to see you use that technique, replied Naruto's tenant before he was covered in his demonic cloak with one tail. Naruto mimicked Sasuke, but instead cupped his right hand with his left and flexing his fingers like claws before he started pumping Kurama's chakra into his hand. The crowd watched in shocked horror as Naruto's right hand began to grow fur around it before bursting into crimson-colored flames. Raising his head to meet the Uchiha's glare with his own, Naruto's eyes turned blood red with a slitted pupil while the Skara turned blacker than the darkest night. Before he took off at speeds that surprised even his team and siblings at the Uchiha, who sped towards him with speed surpassing that of a Chunin. Time seemed to slow down as the two Genin sped towards one another, each intent on killing the other with their respective jutsu. The two were so focused on each other that they failed to notice that the civilians in the stands began to fall asleep, while the ninja present, who were still on edge from the earlier happenings, immediately dispelled the Jinjutsu around them. Just as the two of them were about to collide, an explosion of smoke appeared in the Kage box before multiple blurs shot out of the smoke and onto the roof of the stadium. Two blurs were also heading towards them, but neither Genin was paying attention as they thrust their attacks at one another. Chidori. Kitsune style, burning fox claw. The two lethal techniques collided in an explosion of power before the two Genin were sent flying in opposite directions. Naruto skidded to halt just as his team and siblings landed around him, all ready to begin fighting. I take it the invasion started? Asked Naruto as he slowly got to his feet. Yeah, said Kakashi as he watched the smoke from the explosion clear away, revealing Sasuke leaning against two shinobi with blank masks on. So, Sasuke was being trained by Root Shinobi that explains things. As soon as he finished speaking, an explosion happened at the main gate of the village. When the smoke cleared, it revealed three giant snake summons as they crashed through the gate and began to destroy anything in sight. The two Root Shinobi took that as their cue to leave and carried away Sasuke's unconscious body with them. Looks like you right about them using summons to get past the out-defense Naruto, said Hade as he watched the Root Shinobi with a critical eye that only a master swordsman possessed. Naruto nodded in agreement before turning his attention to the newly created ceiling barrier around where the Kages were. Yeah, let's hope my clones got their part completed in time to help out, he said before he did a quick analysis of the situation at hand. All right, Karui and Rui-sensei work with Hate to clean up the garbage around here. The three-sword-wielding ninja nodded in understanding. Kakashi, Kurenai, and Guy, I need you to spread out to the surrounding area and make sure that no more enemy shinobi get close to the arena. Once again, three nods were the only answer he got before he turned to Anko. Anko, I want you to track down Sasuke and those Root Shinobi. Do not engage them, but feel free to kill anyone else that happens to get in your way, sis, he said when he saw Anko pout at not being allowed to kill the annoying Uchiha. Yujito and I will help out the Raikage and the old man. I have a feeling they're going to need all the help they can get. All right, everyone, move out, said Naruto before he and Yujito jumped towards the purple ceiling barrier. Unfortunately, he jumped away before he could see any of the smiles that spread across the faces of his teammate and siblings. He truly has the makings of a future Kage, and I know one day he'll become a Kage too. Surpass all others was the general thought of all the Jounin present before each left to complete their assignments. The battle for Konoha had finally begun. Kanahagakure no Sato, main gate. Hold the line, men. Don't let them advance any further into the village, shouted Ibiki as he observed the battle from the top of the building. Damn, I should have taken that warning from the Namikaze brats seriously. If I had brought that silver-haired Genin in, we might have been more prepared for this, thought Ibiki, inwardly cursing himself for dismissing the warning from the blonde Kumo Genin so easily. Suddenly a Chunin landed near him with a few cuts and bruises on his body. Turning to the panting Chunin, Ibiki barked out, "Report." Sir, our forces are spread too thin. Squads 12 through 16 are currently trying to stall the summons from advancing into the village any further while the remainder of our forces are trying to hold back the advancing Suna and Odo forces, said the Chunin as he looked up at Ibiki to see the burly man frowning in concentration. What should we do, sir? Have squads 12 to 16 break off from engaging the summons and regroup with the main forces to hold the line. Before he could continue, the wide-eyed Chunin interrupted him. But sir, what about the summons? We can't just ignore them leave them to destroy the village. Leave the summons to the Umbu. I've already dispatched the demolition corps to aid in stopping the summons. Just get our men back on the front and hold back the invading forces, shouted Ibiki as the Chunin quickly nodded his head before taking off to deliver the orders. Ibiki turned his attention to the 3 giant snake summons that were currently destroying anything in their path. As he continued to watch the summons destroy the village, 3 Akimichi clan members grew to the size of the Hokage Tower and engaged the snake summons, one of which being the head of the Akimichi himself, Chozo Akimichi. If Chozo's getting involved, then Inoichi and Shikaku can't be far behind, whispered Ibiki with a smirk before 5 Suna ninja suddenly turned and started attacking their allies with a glazed look in their eyes. Not far from them, a group of Odo Chunin suddenly stopped in their tracks and grabbed onto their necks like someone was choking them. Yeah, so the Inoshikaicho formation are making themselves known. I guess it's about time I joined the fray as well, he whispered to himself before turned to the invading forces and jumped down into the fray while making hand signs. Landing in front of a group of Suna Jounin, he finished his hand signs before whispering, summoning jutsu, torture chamber. The world around Ibiki and the Suna Jounin suddenly turned dark before a cage closed around them, and the enemy Jounin had their wrists and ankles bound in chains. Smirking to himself, Ibiki made a few more hand signs, causing the floor of the cage to open up, revealing dozens of gears of all shapes and sizes before wires wrapped around the trapped Jounin and began to constrict around them, specifically their necks. Normally, I'd torture you for information, but I'm a busy man and I really don't have the time for that right now, so I'll just kill you and be done with it. With that said, he made on more hand sign. The gears started to rotate, pulling the wire around the Suna Jounin's necks before finally cutting clean through them. Canceling the jutsu, Ibiki watched as more enemy shinobi charged them. Taking one last look around him, he saw the 3 Akimichis and the demolition corps of the Umbu getting pushed back by the snake summons. Damn it, if only Lord Jiraiya were here. He cursed before engaging the charging shinobi along with the rest of his forces. A few blocks away from the stadium. Where do these cockroaches keep coming from? Asked Kurenai as she kicked away another Odo Chunin. A few feet away from her, Kakashi had just stabbed another Suna Jounin in the neck with a kunai before turning to see another 3 ninja take his place. Cursing under his breath, he uncovered his Sharingan before placing the 3 ninja in a Genjutsu and leaving them to kill each other. I don't know Kurenai, but just keep them away from the arena, he said before taking out a shuriken and throwing it at some charging Odo ninja. Quickly going through hand signs, he whispered just loud enough for the Odo ninja to hear him. Ninja art, shuriken shadow, clone jutsu. The one shuriken turned into hundreds just before impaling the charging shinobi. Needless to say, none of them survived. I know that, Kakashi, said Kurenai in an annoyed tone as she placed another enemy shinobi in a genjutsu. While she was doing this, however, she failed to notice an Odo Chunin sneaking up behind her with a kodachi in hand. Before the enemy ninja had a chance to attack her, though, he was stopped by a young voice's shout. Fong over Fong. Whirling around, the Odo Chunin barely had time to react before he was hit from 2 sides by what looked like twin tornadoes. Kurenai and Kakashi turned to the source of the voice and watched as 2 Kibas stopped spinning and landed a few feet away from Kurenai. Kiba, what are you doing here? questioned Kurenai with a stern expression on her face. One of the Kibas gulped slightly before shaking off his fear somewhat and answering. I came to help. We saw you guys heading this way, so we decided to come and lend a hand, said Kiba before he and the transformed Akamaru used their Fong over Fong to attack Asuna Chunin. We, said Kurenai and Kakashi at the same time, while sending a curious glance to each other. Yes, we, said a deep voice that was all too familiar to the two former Konoha Jounin. Turning around, the two Jounin came face to face with Asuma Sarutobi with a dead Suna ninja held in a headlock under his arm. Not far from him, they saw a shadow moving across the ground before attaching to an Odo ninja's shadow, holding him in place. Said ninja tried to break free before he was rolled over by a human meatball that shrank to reveal Choji, with Shikamaru coming out of a shadowed alleyway. Asuma, I thought you were assigned to the West Gate, said Kakashi as he spun around and sliced another ninja's neck open. I was, but when Rado radioed to the forces to keep on alert, I made my way to the arena to see if Pops needed any help, said Asuma as he blocked Asuna Shinobi's kunai with one of his trench knives and used the other to gut the man. Right before I got there, the Kage box went up in smoke. And I saw you and Kurenai heading this way. I rounded up the genin there, and we came here to help, though I don't necessarily like having the genin fighting like this. It can't be helped, one way or another. They'll eventually have to get used to fighting and killing, said Kakashi, though he had to hide the contempt in his voice. True, he didn't like putting children in harm's way, but these children were shinobi. They needed to learn to stand on their own and not rely on others to protect them, something his little brother and his team mates understood all too well. With Guy and Lee, the two taijutsu specialists were mowing through their opponents like a hot knife through butter. The invading Suna and Odo forces watched on in horror as the two green blurs continued to cut through their forces with their bare hands. Lee, we must not let these unyouthful shinobi get near the stadium. If we don't stop them here, our flames of youth shall dampen, shouted Guy as he punched a hole clean through Asuna Jounin's chest. Yes, Guy-sensei, I will not allow them to get any further than here. And should I fail to do that, then I shall run from one side of the continent to the other on my hands. And if I cannot do that, I will, Lee said, but was interrupted when an Odo Chunin tried to stab him with a kunai. Grabbing onto the man's wrist, Lee gave him a sharp elbow to the chest, effectively knocking the wind out of him, before jumping up to deliver a spin kick to the side of the man's head. Such unyouthfulness, he said before he jumped over to his sensei, and the two of them began destroying the ranks of the enemy shinobi. In the arena, Hate ducked under the kunai of Asuna shinobi before running him through with his sword. Seeing an Odo shinobi coming at him from the right, Hate twisted his sword that was still buried in the Suna shinobi's chest before cutting clean through the Suna shinobi and decapitating the charging Odo shinobi. Flicking the blood off of his sword, Hate turned to see how his fellow swordsmen were faring. Darui was using his cleaver sword to his advantage and easily chopping down any enemy who dared to approach him while flicking kunai every now and then to stop charging enemies. Karui was using her katana to cut down her opponents with a deadly grace. Because she was a genin kunoichi, many of the male shinobi thought she was easy pickings and tried to gang up on her. Big mistake on their part. They soon learned that Karui was more than capable of defending herself and was proving it by aiming to cut off any male's junk that tried to attack. Wincing as he watched the Kumo kunoichi cut another man's junk off, Hate quickly turned away and began to cut through enemies with the speed and precision of a master. With Karui ducking under another kunai that was thrown at her, Karui spun on her heel and gutted the three Odo shinobi who tried to surround her. Just as she was about to try and find another enemy to fight, she was forced to block a katana that was coming down of her. Following the blade, she found that her attacker was a girl with two buns on her head that resembled a panda. You're that Tintin girl, aren't you? Asked a somewhat shocked Karui. Getting a forced nod from the girl, Karui pushed her blade back and got some distance between the two of them. What the hell's with you? Your village is being invaded, and I'm trying to help you. Why are you attacking me? Because that teammate of yours killed Niji Kuin, said the enraged Tenten with a glare that could put even the Shinigami on edge. Karui just blinked in confusion for a few seconds before realization suddenly dawned on her. You had a crush on him, didn't you? She said as she unconsciously readied her blade, knowing this fight couldn't be avoided. I loved him, and now, thanks to your team, mate, I'll never get the chance to tell him, shouted Tintin as her tears started to fall, but her glare never wavered in its intensity. Since your team, mate, took away someone precious to me, I'll take away someone precious to him. With that declaration, the enraged weapons user charged at Karui with her katana at the ready. Raising her own katana, Karui blocked Tintin's downward slash before breaking away and swinging at Tintin's legs. Jumping over the strike, Tintin sent a kick at Karui's head, which she rolled out of the way of. Not letting up in her assault, Tintin took out 3 kunai and threw them at the Kumo Kunoichi before following them in. Blocking the 3 kunai, Karui failed to notice Tintin's slash at her side until the last second. Karui barely managed to jump in time to avoid a fatal injury, but she received a small gash across her abdomen. Okay, time to get serious, said Karui as she started charging her lightning chakra in her katana and shaping it into a row of serrated teeth along the edge of her blade. Kumo style, lightning saw, swinging her lightning-infused katana at her panda-like opponent, a spinning saw of pure lightning launched at the weapon's mistress. Jumping out of the way of the attack, Tintin landed across from Karui with a smirk on her face. Her smirk vanished when she felt a shock run through her body. Looking down at her leg, she noticed a gash that sparked a few times before dying down. Returning her attention to her now smirking opponent, the 2 kunoichi readied their katanas before charging in to continue their fight. Outside the ceiling barrier. What are we going to do now? We must help Lord Hokage, said a bird-masked Umbu member wearing a brown cloak. Turning to his right, the Umbu glanced at the wolf-masked Umbu wearing a white cloak. Captain, said Umbu captain was currently deep in thought about the current situation and what they could do to help their leader. The only way to break this barrier is for Lord Hokage to kill one of the ones holding the barrier together. But now that they've constructed a barrier on the inside, that option is out of the question. If we try to get through the barrier using force, his thoughts trailed off as he glanced over at the charred remains of his subordinate. Before he could think further on the matter, 2 blonde blurs appeared beside him. The 3 Umbu whirled around ready to fight, only to come face to face with Naruto Namikaze and Yujitoni. The wolf-masked Umbu was about to ask what they were doing when he was cut off by his lion-masked subordinate. What are you doing here, demon? Before Naruto could respond, he was cut off by the wolf-masked Umbu, of all people. Silence, you fool. Show Lord Namikaze the respect he deserves, said the Umbu captain in a voice that left no room for argument. The 2 Kumo ninja were slightly surprised that a Konoha Umbu would not only defend Naruto, but also show him respect. That's right, I forgot that Umbu captains are privy to classified information that regular Umbu aren't. Perhaps I can use that to my advantage, thought Naruto before turning to address the wolf-masked Umbu. What's the situation? The lion-masked Umbu looked like he was going to say something, but was stopped by a look from his superior. Returning his attention to the 2 blondes before him, the white-cloaked Umbu began his explanation. Lord Namikaze, Orochimaru has trapped Lord Hokage the Raikage inside of the barrier, and so far all methods to break the barrier have either failed or been stopped. Naruto nodded absent-mindedly as he studied the barrier for anything that could be useful. His eyes widened when he felt something off about the chakra running through the barrier. Turning to his girlfriend, he spoke in a tone that was a mix of surprise and humor. Yujito-chan, what do you sense from the chakra forming this barrier? Yujito gave him a confused look before closing her eyes and focusing on the barrier. After a few seconds, her face lit up in surprise before melting into one of understanding. The chakra forming the barrier isn't normal chakra, she said, surprising the Umbu present, though it's not demonic either. What are you talking about? Asked the bird-masked Umbu as he glanced at the barrier preventing them from aiding their leader. Simple, the chakra in this barrier isn't normal human chakra, nor is it the demonic chakra possessed by the Bijou, said Yujito, in what many would call lecture mode. Instead, it's a bastardized version of demonic chakra. It possesses similar qualities to that of demonic chakra, but still retains most of its human attributes. It's an unstable and dangerous attempt at creating a new type of chakra that surpasses everyday human chakra. The three Umbu stared at the blonde Kumo Kunoichi in stunned silence. The fact that she could glean all of that from just sensing the chakra making the barrier was astounding to the Konoha shinobi. Meaning that even though it possesses demonic qualities, regular demonic chakra can easily overpower it, said Naruto before he nodded at Yujito, and the two of them were shrouded in the demonic chakra of their Bijou. Before the three Umbu could react, the two Jinchuriki leapt from their position on the roof and were on a collision course with the ceiling barrier. To the awe of the Umbu and the shocked horror of the Sound Four, instead of erupting into flames, the two Jinchuriki easily passed through the barrier before jumping to where the two Kages were facing Orochimaru. With the Kages and Orochimaru same time. So this was your plan all along. Orochimaru asked Sarutobi from his position in Orochimaru's headlock with a kunai to his neck. Abi and Dodai were a little ways away, watching the exchange with interest, each silently waiting for the fireworks to begin. So what happened to the real Kazekage? Oh, I think I left his body lying in some ditch a few miles outside the village, said Orochimaru casually, as if he was talking about the weather. Whatever it is you seek here in the village, you won't get it, said Sarutobi before his body started to turn brown. Surprised, Orochimaru plunged his kunai into Sarutobi's neck, causing the clone to collapse into a puddle of mud. Turning to the other three shinobi trapped in his barrier, Orochimaru saw his old sensei wearing his full battle gear a few feet away from them. I'll stop you before you get a chance to carry out your plans. Hearing this, the snake Sannin couldn't help but start chuckling before he erupted into a full maniacal laugh. You're a fool, sensei. I've already got what I came for, he said, causing Sarutobi to frown while the three Kumo shinobi just raised a curious eyebrow at the statement. I gave Saban my curse mark back in the Forest of Death. No matter what you do, he will eventually come to me for power. Scowling at his former student, Sarutobi vanished from his spot only to reappear behind Orochimaru with his hands in the snake sign. Earth style, Earth Flow River. A river of mud erupted in front of the third Hokage, carrying his surprised ex-student with it. Going through more hand signs at a rate that surprised the Kumo shinobi, Sarutobi once again finished with the snake sign. Earth style, Earth Dragon Bomb. A dragon head formed at the beginning of the mud river and started firing globs of earth at the snake Sannin. Not letting up in his assault, Sarutobi once again went through hand signs, only this time ending with the tiger sign. Fire style, Fire Dragon Bomb. Letting loose a torrent of white-hot flames. Sarutobi watched as the flames ignited his earth projectiles and impacted with the pale-faced Sannin. Everyone was surprised as they watched the exchange. Dodai's expression, though, turned thoughtful as he contemplated what he had just witnessed. So this is what the feared god of shinobi is capable of. To think that he could use fire and earth-style ninjutsu to this extent without a kekii. Jinkai similar to mine is just mind-boggling. Naruto, I hope you know what you'll be up against when this is all over, said Shinobi was still glaring at the place where his attack had hit. Come out, Orochimaru. I know you're hiding. The Kumo shinobi watched as the pale form of Orochimaru slowly rose from the ground, still wearing the stolen robes of the Kazakage. Kukukuku, you always did like to ruin my fun, Sensei. Oh well, I suppose we should get this show started. But first, he said, turning to the Raikage and his guards, what side will you fight for? Will you side with Konoha, who has shunned and scorned one of your most promising genin, or will you side with me and help to destroy this pathetic village? Sarutobi turned wary eyes on the Raikage. Naruto may still be loyal to Konoha, but the Raikage and everyone else in Kumo would do anything to keep him in that village, even if it meant declaring war on Konoha. Orochimaru was also watching the Raikage with a critical eye. No matter what his decision, he and every one of his shinobi in the village will be dead when this is over. Although, facing the Raikage, his guards, and the old fool all at once will be tricky. Even though I hate this village with a passion, you are too dangerous to be left alive. For that reason alone, I'll put my hatred aside and fight with Sarutobi to end you here and now, said as he fell into a taijutsu stance as he drew two of his swords and got into a stance while Dodai gathered his chakra and drew a kunai. Sarutobi frowned slightly, but then fell into a stance alongside the Raikage as they prepared to attack the Snake Sannin. Orochimaru frowned as he observed his opponents for a second before throwing away the Kazakage robes and sinking into his own stance. Neither side moved, each waiting for the other to strike first. Orochimaru tensed his body to attack before his senses kicked in, and he jumped back, barely avoiding the kunai that would have taken out his neck. Turning to where the knife was thrown, Orochimaru saw two blonde blurs before his senses kicked in again, and he jumped out of the way of three more kunai. Landing near the edge of his ceiling barrier, the pale-faced Sannin had to hide his surprise at the sight that greeted him. Standing beside the Raikage was none other than Naruto Namikaze and Yujito Ni, each ready for a fight. A, B, and Dodai smirked at seeing their two favorite blondes ready to fight alongside them. The Hokage, on the other hand, couldn't hide his shock. Naruto, what the hell are you doing here, and how did you get past the barrier? Apparently this question was on everyone's mind as they all turned curious or furious eyes to the two blondes. Simple old man, this barrier informed from a bastardized version of demonic chakra, meaning that regular demonic chakra can easily pass through it, said Naruto, as he eyed his opponent warily. Orochimaru seemed surprised for a moment before it was replaced with his usual maniac grin. Kukuko, my you sure are the clever one, aren't you, Naruto-kun? Perhaps I should have given you my mark instead of Sasuke-kun, said Orochimaru as his opponents all turned to glare at him. He was about to continue taunting them when a massive fireball came from above him, forcing him to dodge. Looking up, he noticed a clone of Naruto smirk at him before disappearing in a poof of smoke. Turning back to the original, he barely had time to react as two more fireballs were about to consume him. Jumping over the unforgiving flames, Orochimaru prepared to launch his own jutsu, but was stopped by a powerful punch to the gut, courtesy of the Raikage. Not letting up in his attack, it started to beat the Sannin into a pulp before finally sending him hurtling towards the roof with a massive axe kick. He wasted no time in taking the opportunity his brother provided. Jumping up to meet the falling Sannin, he moved to cut his head clean off. Unfortunately, just as he cut the pale man's head off, the Orochimaru in front of him turned into mud. Cursing under his breath, he turned in midair, looked around for the slippery snake. Dodai, watching the altercation from his position on the roof, noticed movement behind the eight-tail Jinchuriki. Quickly going through hand signs, the lava user formed a rubber rope in his hands before swinging it to catch B's ankle. Be behind you. B looked behind him only to see Orochimaru with a sword coming out of his mouth, ready to impale him. Just as the sword was about to cut into him, B felt himself being pulled down towards Dodai and his fellow Jinchuriki. Landing next to them, B smiled in thanks before returning his attention to Orochimaru. Said snake user swallowed his kusanagi before turning to glare at the group of shinobi he was facing. Before he had a chance to do anything, though, a shadow overcame him before an all-too familiar voice came from above him. Guillotine drop. Looking up to the source, Orochimaru barely had time to register the threat before he was the victim of a falling axe kick, courtesy of the Raikage. Jumping away from the impact site, it landed back next to Bee while keeping a close eye on where Orochimaru was. "Come on out, you snake freak." They heard chuckling before Orochimaru slowly started to come out of the roof with almost no injuries from the exchange. Cuckoo, I must say, this fight is much more entertaining than I could have hoped for. Although I think it's time we even up the odds a little bit. Don't you agree? Said Orochimaru before he snapped his fingers, and a small opening appeared in the barrier behind him, and 3 blurs shot through it before the barrier resealed itself. The blurs stopped next to Orochimaru, revealing 3 shinobi wearing blank masks with the kanji for root on the forehead. "Everyone, it'd like to introduce you to my old subordinates from my time in Root." Sarutobi tensed as he remembered the few times he had worked with Danzo's Root during the Third Great Shinobi War. "Be on your guard. Root shinobi are not to be underestimated. Danzo raised them to be emotionless killers under his command. I guess with his death, they turned to one of their own," said Sarutobi as he bit his thumb before going through 5 familiar hand signs. Summoning Jutsu. Out of the poof of smoke that appeared came the one and only Monkey King himself, Enma. "So, it's Orochimaru again. Is it Hiruzen? I take it things have gotten pretty dire for you to summon me," said Enma as he glared at Orochimaru, who frowned slightly at this new turn of events. "Yes, Enma. We need to use the adamantine staff," said Sarutobi as Enma nodded in understanding before performing a single hand sign before transforming into a black staff with golden tips. "Prepare yourself, Orochimaru. Today I correct the mistake I made all those years ago." "Cuckoo, is that so, Sensei? Then maybe I should call in a little more help," said Orochimaru before he started going through hand signs at an incredible rate. Clapping his hands together at the end of the sequence, Orochimaru smirked when he noticed Sarutobi's wide eyes, summoning Jutsu. Reanimation. A coffin rose from the ground in front of Orochimaru with the kanji for first engraved on the front. A second one appeared next to the first, but instead with the kanji for second on it. Sarutobi watched with bated breath as the coffins slowly opened, while everyone else was preparing for the worst. Gasps came from everyone when they saw who was inside of the coffins. Standing before them were none other than the first and second Hokages, Hashirama and Tobirama Senju. "You bastard! How dare you desecrate their names with that cursed jutsu?" said Sarutobi through gritted teeth as he watched the 2 confused Kages look around them before their eyes settled on Sarutobi. "You've gotten old, Saru," said Tobirama as he looked at his old student and successor. "I'm curious, though. What are you doing with Kumo Ninja?" "It appears that he is fighting alongside them. Against us," said Hashirama when he noticed Orochimaru behind them with 2 control tags in his hands. Tobirama turned to look at the tags before he nodded in understanding. "I see. So we have been brought back by my own forbidden jutsu." Orochimaru merely smirked before he placed the tags in the back of their heads. "Now that the numbers have been evened up, why don't we get back to business, shall we?" said Orochimaru before he turned to the 3 Root members. "Dajime, you handle the Raikage. Terai and Terra, you 2 handle the Kumo Jounin. As for you 2, I want to dispose of those 2 blondes. I want to see the look on Sarutobi Sensei's face when someone he cares for is killed by his own teachers." Naruto and Yujito tensed as they prepared for the hardest fight of their lives, before any of them had. A chance to react, though, the 2 Hokages shot forward compelled by the tags to obey Orochimaru. Cursing under his breath, Naruto grabbed Yujito and jumped away from the charging brothers just in time to avoid 2 bone-shattering punches. Trying to take advantage of the revived brother's close proximity, he spun on his heel, aiming to kick the 2 in the head. Before his attack come land, however, the 2 brothers jumped over the leg and continued on their way to the 2 blondes. Turning to pursue the 2 Hokages, It was forced to jump away as a fist the size of a horse nearly crushed him. Turning to face his attacker, saw one of the root umbu that was with Orochimaru block his path. "Damn it," he muttered before glancing at Bee and Dodai, only to find them facing off against one the root umbu as well. Cursing under his breath, he returned his attention to his opponent before falling into his taijutsu stance. "Better make this quick. Naruto and Yujito are going to need all the help they can get." With Sarutobi and Orochimaru. "You're a coward, Orochimaru. Only a truly twisted person would use such a jutsu and then have those two attack mere children," said Sarutobi as he stared his old student down. Orochimaru merely chuckled before sinking into his taijutsu stance. "I thought you would be happy, sensei. After all, you are finally reunited with your old teachers," he said with a twisted smirk as he watched Sarutobi's face contort in anger. "I've had enough of this, Orochimaru. It's time I did what should have been a long time ago," said Sarutobi as he charged his former student his adamantine staff at the ready. Somewhere outside Konoha. "Are we almost ready? The attack has already begun," said a Naruto clone as he observed the other clones make the final touches to the summoning seal they had drawn. "Just about. We just need to adjust the seal for whoever it is we plan to summon," said another clone as he finished drawing the outer part of the seal. Nodding in understanding, the first clone closed his eyes and went through who would be best suited to summon to handle the snakes destroying the village. "All right, adjust the seal to summon the Inferno twins. I'm sure they'd love to have some fun," said the first clone as the others nodded in agreement and began to make the necessary adjustments. A few minutes later, the 6 clones were positioned around the seal, gathering the chakra necessary for the summoning. The 6 clones then began to go through the hand signs necessary for the summoning before they all finished in the ram sign. Opening their eyes, the 6 clones slammed theirs on the ground in front of them at the same time with a roar of summoning jutsu, Inferno twins. All fighting around the village stopped as a massive cloud of smoke appeared just outside the village walls. The Konoha ninja were worried that the enemy had summoned even more snakes to help destroy the village, while the invading forces thought that their allies must have summoned another snake to help them. As the smoke cleared, though, the Konoha ninja couldn't stop the shiver that ran down their spines at the sight before them. While the invading forces were confused, they had never heard of anyone holding a summoning contract for that animal clan. Outside the walls of Kanehagakure, no Sato stood 2 four-tailed foxes. Their orange fur shone in the rays of the sun as they unleashed a mighty roar that shook the foundations of the village itself. Everyone who had lived through the Kyuubi attack 13 years ago was frozen in place, memories of that fateful night resurfacing. The roar of the Kyuubi as it attacked the village echoing in their ears as they all watched the 2 foxes slowly made their way to the village, each person silently praying to their fallen loved ones as it seemed they would soon be joining them in the afterlife. With the Inferno twins. "Who summoned me?" said the 2 foxes at the same time before they turned to each other with a fox's equivalent to a raised eyebrow. "Hey bro," they said to each other before slapping one of their tails together, oddly resembling a high five. The 6 clones that had summoned the 2 foxes had to dodge some of the embers from the fire their tails hitting caused. "Hey you 2, watch the fireworks would you?" screamed the first clone with his eyebrow twitching dangerously. The 2 foxes turned their attention to the top of the elder twin's head, only to come face to face with 6 irritated Naruto clones. "Naruto-sama," asked the foxes, getting a negative shake of the heads from the clones. "No, we're clones," said the first clone before pointing to the dark purple barrier off in the distance. "With our luck and who we are, the real one is most likely inside that barrier fighting against Orochimaru with the Raikage and everybody else." "Then why have you summoned us?" asked the younger twin as he observed the village before them. Raising an eyebrow at the unmoving people in the village, The fox turned back to the Naruto clones. Any reason those humans wearing the dark blue are staring at us in fear, while those gray and tan ones look confused? Because we summoned you in the middle of an invasion. The dark blue ones fear you, because this is the village that Kurama attacked 13 years ago, before he was sealed inside of me, said one of the clones, causing the two foxes to snarl while the air around them began to heat up. Calm down, you two. This village's time will come, but not today. We need you to handle the 3 snakes in the center of the village. Why? Those snakes are destroying the village. I say we let them do as they want, said the elder twin as they watched the snake summons attack the 3 Akimichi members. No, said the first clone. When this village's time comes, we will be the ones to destroy it, and the entire Fox clan will be their help. For now, though, I want some snake barbecue. What do you say, guys? The 2 foxes smirked at this and looked at each other before nodding in agreement. Since you're just clones, you might want to stay out of this one if you don't want to get dispelled, said the elder twin before the clones jumped away and landed on some trees a ways away. Now, then, shall we, little brother? Yes, my dear brother, we shall, said the younger twin before they both charged at the snake summons with a hungry glint in their eyes. With the clones. We do realize that those 2 will most likely cause as much collateral damage as they possibly can, right? Asked one of the clone while the others nodded in agreement. I wouldn't be surprised if they destroy half the village during their fight, but as long as they leave the village standing enough so that we can destroy it later, then I really don't care, said the first clone with a smirk. Well, our part of the plan's complete. Better let the boss know. The other clones nodded in agreement before dispelling in a poof of smoke. The first clone was about to do the same, until he felt a familiar demonic chakra nearby. The boss did plan on talking to him. I'm sure he won't mind if I do it for him, whispered the clone before jumping towards the source of the demonic chakra. With Kakashi and Kurenai. Kurenai behind you, shouted Kakashi as he threw a kunai over Kurenai's shoulder, killing the Odo Chunin that was about to stab her. Thanks, Kakashi, she said as she spun on her heel and roundhouse kicked 3 Sunaninja in the face. Glancing over to where the 3 genin were fighting, she saw Shikamaru trap another 3 Odo ninja, while Kiba and Choji hit them with their respective techniques. As she was looking at the genin, she felt like something was off. Glancing around at everyone else on the battlefield, she saw Kakashi frying a pair of Odo Jounin with a lightning jutsu and Asuma spinning on his heel and slicing 3 Suna Chunin into ribbons. She looked back over to the genin and her answer slammed into her like an Akimichi's fist. Kakashi, she shouted, getting his attention. Where are your other 2 genin, Sakura and Ino? Kakashi narrowed his only visible eye in confusion before he looked over at the 3 Konoha genin. His eye widened in understanding before he turned back to Kurenai with a scowl on his masked face. Oh, those 2 better not have. He trailed off as he kicked another Odo ninja in face. With Anko. Damn, I'll give those root bastards one thing. They sure know how to eliminate their trail, said Anko as she continued to jump through the trees outside the village. Too bad they can't eliminate the Uchiha Brat's trail for them. As she was jumping through the trees, a small, green snake with black spots scattered over its body poked its head over her shoulder. Mistress, the Uchiha sent 200 yards to the north, and it seems he's begun moving on his own again. If my memory serves, they're nearing the border of Fire Country and Rice Country, said the snake, flicking its forked tongue a few times. Why would they be going to Rice Country? Asked Anko out loud as she continued to pursue her targets. She continued on in silence for a few more minutes, contemplating what her summon had told her before her eyes shot open in understanding. That's where the Odo village must be, she screamed before she picked up her pace. Damn it. Rice may be neutral, but no ninja is allowed in the country without checking in with the daimyo. If Odo is in Rice Country, then only Odo ninja are allowed in and out without hassle. Damn you, Orochimaru. You planned this, didn't you? She continued to pursue her targets for another few minutes before she reached the edge of the tree line and the forest gave way to the grassy plains that bordered rice country. Son of a bitch, they're already across the border, she muttered before taking a quick glance around the area. She noticed light reflecting off of something on the ground. Moving over to the object, she raised an eyebrow in mild surprise at what it was, a Konoha headband with a slash through it. So the brat really did abandon Konoha. This should make things much more interesting. She was brought out of her thoughts by her summon, poking its head over her shoulder again. Mistress, there are 2 scents 100 yards south by southwest of here. Judging by the scent trails in the air, they try to follow you, but lost track of you. They don't seem that strong either. The scent of their chakra is barely above what you would consider academy level, said the snake as Anko furrowed her brow in confusion. Thank you, Nioi. I can handle things from here, said Anko as the small snake nodded before disappearing in a poof of smoke. Now to figure out who the hell was stupid enough to try and follow me. With Sakura and Ino. Nice going, Ino pig. Thanks to you we lost that crazy snake lady, said an irritated Sakura as she and her blonde team may continued to jump through the trees of Fire Country. Where's your excuse? You're a kunoichi too, you know. How about putting your skills to use and help me find her? Said Ino as she glared at her rival. You know I'm not a tracking type. I'm a Jinjutsu type kunoichi, said Sakura, her annoyance at her team made clear in her voice. Well, I'm not a tracking type either. My dad says I'm more suited to be an interrogator, said Ino as she turned around to get in her teammate's face. And if you're a Jinjutsu type, then why don't you know any Jinjutsu? She said with a smirk as Sakura's face contorted in anger. Oh yeah. Well, how the hell are you supposed to be an interrogator? You only know one of your clan's jutsu, and you get squeamish at even the sight of blood, said Sakura as she glared at her blonde nemesis. The 2 wannabe kunoichi kept bickering back and forth like that for an indeterminate amount of time, completely unaware they were being watched. In a tree a few yards away. You have got to be kidding me. Those 2 were the ones who tried to follow me? What in the 7 levels of hell possessed them to do something this stupid? Screamed Anko in her head as she continued to watch the 2 girls bicker. Okay, as entertaining as this is, I think it's time I break up this fight. She though before jumping out of the tree, she was in and landing in front of the 2 startled kunoichi. What the hell do you 2 think you're doing? Anko asked with a glare that sent a shiver down the 2 genin's spine. The 2 genin were so frozen in fear of the crazy jounin in front of them that they couldn't do much more than stare at her while shivering every now and then. Getting annoyed with their staring, Anko decided to try a different approach. All right, you 2, as a special jounin of Konoha and your superior, I order you to tell me what the hell you were thinking following me. And if I don't like your answer, I'll have you 2 dropped from the ninja program. This seemed to do the trick as the 2 genin snapped out of their stupor with looks of horror on their faces. What? You can't do that! They screamed at the same time. Anko just gave them a look that clearly said, you want to bet? The 2 kunoichi recoiled slightly before Sakura decided to speak up. We were watching the finals when the invasion began. We saw Sasuke-kun get taken away by those 2 masked ninja, and you go after them. We decided to follow you, so we could help bring Sasuke-kun back to the village where he belongs. Where is Sasuke-kun anyway? I thought you wanted to bring him back, she said the last part with a glare at Anko, with Ino glaring at her as well. Anko gladly returned their pathetic glares, while inwardly wondering how they would take the news of their precious Uchiha. Sasuke Uchiha is a traitor to Konoha. He willingly crossed into Rice Country and has willingly joined Otoge-kure and Orochimaru, said Anko, causing the 2 genin's eyes to widen in shock before they narrowed in suspicion. You're lying. Sasuke-kun would never betray the village. He cares too much for us to ever do such a thing, said Ino, back in full fangirl mode. Sakura followed her example and started to defend the Uchiha as well. Yeah, Sasuke-kun would never betray Konoha. Why would he betray the people who love him? She said with her glare intensifying. Anko just stared at the 2 genin in shock for a few seconds, one thought repeating itself over and over in her mind. How the hell can anyone be that thick and oblivious to the truth? Shaking off her shock, the former Konoha Jounin reached into her jacket and pulled out Sasuke's slashed headband. The two fangirls stared at the slashed headband in shock, before their eyes filled with tears and they began to sob. It can't be. Why would Sasuke-kun betray us like this? I don't know why, but we're returning to the village now. We need everyone helping to fight off the invasion, said Anko before she took off in the direction of Konoha, with the two wannabe kunoichi following, their tears still falling. With Naruto and Yujito. Forgive us, young ones. We cannot control our movements, said Tobirama, as he and his brother stood across from the two blonde Jinchuriki. Naruto and Yujito stood at the ready, each mentally preparing themselves for the fight that was about to begin. Although, I sense that you two are not normal genin, are you? Naruto smirked slightly at that. Kurama and Matatabi were their aces in the hole for this fight. You are correct, Tobirama-sama. We aren't normal, said Naruto before he threw a kunai at the two Kages. Neither Senju brother moved to avoid the kunai, since it wouldn't hit either of them on its current path. I guess Tobirama was right. They aren't average genin. They're below average, thought Hashirama as he watched the kunai as it passed harmlessly in between him and his brother. What he failed to notice, though, was Naruto making a half-ram sign just before the kunai exploded a little ways behind the two brothers. Completely caught off guard by the explosion, the brothers were launched forward towards their blonde opponents, who were currently going through hand signs. Fire style, fireball jutsu, said the two Jinchurikis before they both unleashed a fireball the size of a horse at the prone Kages. Clearing his head from the explosion, Tobirama managed to form hand signs as he and his brother continued on their collision course with the fireballs. Finishing in the bird sign, Tobirama brought his right hand to his lips before expelling a large amount of water from his mouth. Water style, tearing torrent jutsu. The water impacted the flames, creating a thick steam layer that blanketed the area of road they were on. Taking advantage of the steam cover, Hashirama jumped towards the two Jinchuriki after his brother used his sensor abilities to locate them. Two silhouettes appeared in the steam as Hashirama sped through hand signs, before ending in the snake sign. Wood style, with spike jutsu, he whispered instantly two wooden spikes shot out of the roof and impaled the two dark figures in the chest, expelling chakra from his body to clear the steam. The first Hokage was met with the sight off two blonde ninja impaled by his jutsu. Frowning at the sight of two young ninja dying by his hand, Hashirama retracted the spikes and moved towards the bodies, only for them to disappear in a shower in sparks. Surprised at being tricked, Hashirama wasn't prepared for the two roundhouse kicks that hit him in the chest and face, sending him skidding back towards his brother. Tobirama watched as his brother was sent skidding in his direction by the two blondes, and he had to admit, he was impressed. No one other than himself and two others had ever managed to catch Hashirama by surprise, and these two genin had just done it twice in the same fight. These two are far from ordinary genin. I can't tell for sure, but there's something about their chakra that's different from normal chakra, thought Tobirama as his brother got back to his feet, like the last attack never happened. It seems the stories of your strength and power weren't as exaggerated as some people believe. You truly live up to your reputation, Hashirama-sama. Tobirama-sama, said Naruto as he faced two of the most powerful shinobi in history. We have to be careful. If these two decide to actually fight us seriously, we'd be dead in under a minute, thought Naruto as he and Yujito continued to stare down the two revived Kages. No kidding, Kit. I may be prideful, but even I have to admit that these two not to trifle with. If you and your mate plan on surviving this, then your only bet is for Yujito to use Matatabi's techniques to defeat them, said the voice of Kurama from inside Naruto's head. You're right, Kurama. I guess I'll just have to buy her some time to get ready, thought Naruto before he turned his head slightly so he could see his girlfriend from the corner of his eye. Yujito-chan, the only chance we have of defeating these two is if you use the jutsu Matatabi taught you, whispered. Naruto, as Yujito, nodded in agreement slightly. You're right, but it will take time to prepare the chakra necessary. And if the first figures out what we are before I can, then he'll just as with style to seal off our demonic chakra from us. Whispered Yujito, as tried to think of a way to prepare her jutsu, without the first figuring out that they were. Jinchuriki, turning so she could see her boyfriend from the corner of her eye. Yujito noticed his infamous fox smirk on his lips. Don't worry, Yujito-chan. Leave that to me, said Naruto before he turned his full attention back to their opponents, who watched them with impassive eyes. Pulling 2 shuriken from his holster, Naruto threw them at the 2 Kages before going through a few hand signs, shuriken shadow, clone jutsu. The 2 shuriken became 200, once again surprising the 2 Hokages. Speeding through hand signs, Hashirama ended in the snake sign once again before slamming his hands on the ground. Wood style, dense forest creation, said the revived Hokage as roots and trees began to grow out of the roof they were standing on and filling the entire ceiling barrier with a forest. One root in particular rose up in front of the 2 brothers, blocking the hail shuriken before it reached them. Naruto frowned as he looked around the forest that now surrounded him and Yujito. Well, damn, this complicates things a little bit, thought Naruto as she continued searching for their opponents. Naruto-kun, they're directly in front of us. They're using the trees as cover so they can attack from the shadows, said Yujito, as pointed in the direction they had last seen the 2 Kages. Nodding and understanding, Naruto formed a few shadow clones before he turned to Yujito. Hide yourself while you prepare the jutsu. My clones will protect you while I hold off those 2, said Naruto before jumping off in the direction of the 2 Kages. Yujito sighed slightly before she too jumped from her spot in search of a place to conceal herself until she was ready, the clones following at her heels. Naruto landed on a branch across from the 2 Kages with a frown on his face as he contemplated how he should go about this. He was brought out of his thoughts by the sound of Tobirama's usual monotone voice. How is it that you know the Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu? That is a kenjutsu that is only found in Konoha, not in Kumo, asked the second Hokage, his eyebrow raised in mild curiosity. Naruto had to fight hard to keep the satisfied smirk off of his face. It wasn't every day that you piqued the curiosity of a person like Tobirama Senju. You are correct. The Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu is a Konoha kenjutsu, but your student Sarutobi gave me access to the Hokage's personal library. I must admit, I was very impressed with everything that I found in there. Hashirama and Tobirama narrowed their eyes when he mentioned Sarutobi giving him access to the Hokage's library before returning to the impassive nature. I see, was the only thing Tobirama said before started going through hand signs. Once again finishing in the bird sign, Tobirama kept his impassive face even as his jutsu formed, water style, water dragon jutsu. From out of nowhere, a large serpentine dragon made of water charged at Naruto as he sped through hand signs of his own. Earth style, earth spike jutsu, he said as he jumped from the branch he was standing on, the water dragon continuing its pursuit. Landing on an open patch of roof, Naruto slammed his hands on the ground, causing a large earth spike to rise up and impale the water dragon just before it hit him. Hurry, Yujito-chan. I can't keep this up for long, thought Naruto as he went through more hand signs as he charged the first and second Hokages. With the Reikage, same time. Damn it, I need to hurry up and beat this guy. Naruto and Yujito will need everyone they can get to defeat those 2, thought A as he dodged another punch to the face from Dajimo, countering with one of his own to Dajimo's stomach. He smirked as he made contact and knocked his opponent back a few feet. His smirk vanished, however, when Dajimo simply stood up and made no outward indication that the punch affected him. What does it take to get a reaction out of this guy? Thought A as he watched the rogue Akimichi form hand signs. You are unfit to be a Kage or a leader of any kind, said Dajimo in the root monotone. Expansion jutsu, both arms. Dajimo's arms grew to the size of horses before he launched them towards the Reikage. A scowl on the rakiage bobbed and weaved around a massive fist that would surely flatten him if they made contact. How dare he call me an unfit Kage? What does he know about being a leader? Thought A as he jumped over another punch from the root Umbu. Taking advantage of the situation, they started running down the Akimichi's enlarged arms and delivered a crushing roundhouse to the man's face. Stumbling back slightly, Dajimo easily regained his bearings before shrinking his hands and launching a couple of kunai at the rakiage. Easily dodging the kunai, it glanced in the direction the Naruto and Yujito were fighting the first and second Hokages, before he was hit in the face by a flying spin kick. "You are a pathetic excuse for a Kage," said Dajimo, as he slowly stood up from where he had crouched after his attack. "A true Kage makes no ties to his ninja. They are merely tools for him to wage war with, tools that are expendable." A shot the root Umbu a glare he got to his feet and threw away his Kage robes, his muscle chest clear for all to see. "You're wrong. A true Kage would never think of his ninja that way. Only a heartless tyrant like that bastard Danzo would," said the rakiage, spitting out Danzo's name like it was venom. This seemed to finally get a reaction out of the root member, as he scowled at the rakiage before he spoke with an actual emotion in his voice, anger. "Don't you dare insult Danzo-sama. He was far greater leader than anyone has or ever will be," spat the root Umbu, before once again schooling his face into an emotionless mask. Smirking, A activated his lightning-style armor and shot at the root Umbu before landing a devastating punch to the man's gut. He was forced to break away from his intended onslaught, though, as roots and trees began to sprout from the roof, creating a dense forest inside of the barrier. "Damn it! If I don't hurry, Naruto and Yujito will be in serious trouble," thought A before blurring away and appearing in front of Dajimo again and continuing his taijutsu assault. With B, same time. "You know you root bastards are annoying as all hell," said B as he slashed at Terai with one of his swords. Said root member ducked under the slash and tried to stab B as kunai, only to have B's second sword block the strike. Jumping away from each other, the two shinobi just stared at each other for a few seconds before charging back in. Terai sidestepped a stab to the gut and countered with a swipe of his claws, courtesy of the Inuzuka clan's all-fours jutsu. Leaning his head back to avoid the swipe, B used his very unorthodox fighting style and bit into his wrist, holding him in place. Terai, despite his years of training in root, let out a yelp of pain and surprise as he stared at his now trapped hand. "You are without a doubt the most unorthodox shinobi on the planet," said Terai in the typical root monotone, with a little disgust seeping into his voice. Bringing up his kunai, Terai used their position to his advantage and tried for a stab to B's stomach. Surprisingly, B raised his left sword and blocked the stab easily, even though he couldn't have known the stab was coming. Getting irritated at his wrist, still being trapped in his opponent's jaws, Terai reared his leg back and kicked B where the sun don't shine. The reaction was instant. B's grip on Terai's wrist slackened and Terai managed to jump away, a small smirk playing at the corners of his lips. B, on the other hand, was currently bent over holding his family jewels with anime tears rolling down his face. Now that just ain't right. Hitting a man below the belt should be outlawed, thought B as Gyuki winced inside of his host's mind. Not even a true demon can be that cruel, thought Gyuki as he used his chakra to help ease the pain. Shakily standing up, B glared at his opponent with such hatred and anger that even the Shinigami would wince in fear. "All right, you bastard. No more Mr. Nice Guy. I'll make you regret ever meeting me for that cheap shot," said B before he threw his two swords into the air, quickly followed by the 5 on his back. Jumping up after his swords, B caught each of them with a different part of his body before landing on his left leg. Terai stared on in slight shock and awe at how B was holding his swords. He had one under his left armpit, blade facing out, one in each of his elbow joints with his right arm above his head. Another was held in behind his right kneecap, and his right leg was raised, holding another in between his leg and stomach, with the final one in his mouth. B didn't miss a beat the second he landed back on the roof. He jumped towards his opponent before he started spinning at insane speeds. Kumo style. Human buzz saw, said Bee as his spinning form raced towards Tarai, who was still surprised that a human could move like Bee was. However, Tarai was saved from being shredded to pieces by a massive root that sprouted from the roof. Bee stopped his attack as he watched the terrain around him change from that tile roof to a dense forest. Damn it, I better hurry. No telling what kind of trouble Naruto and Yujito will get in with those two as their opponents. Thought Bee before jumped over the root, started using his unpredictable Kenjutsu style to keep Terai on the defensive. With Dodai, same time. Why don't you do us both a favor and die willingly? It'd be too troublesome to fight you right now, said Terra in the typical root, if somewhat lazy, monotone. Dodai just remained in his stance, two kunai at the ready for any kind of attack. Not likely, although, judging by your somewhat lazy aura, I would venture a guess that you are the Nara clan, right? Asked Dodai as he continued to analyze his opponent. Terra sighed slightly before giving a lazy nod in acknowledgement, bringing a look of understanding to Dodai's face. Well, that explains why you don't want to fight me. Even with the shroud this barrier creates, there are just not enough shadows around for you to manipulate. You're a clever one. I'll give you that, but you're wrong. I just want to fight you because I have more important things I could be doing right now, like catching a nap, said Terra, his Nara blood showing as he covered up a yawn. Oh well, I guess the sooner I kill you, the sooner I'll be able to sleep. Dodai stiffened, his eyes on Terra's shadow, waiting for an attack. It was only thanks to his instincts that Dodai managed to jump away from his spot on the roof before multiple spears made out of shadows broke through the tiles. You forgot about the shadows underneath the tiles, said Terra before forming the rat hand sign and launching his shadow at Dodai. Jumping to avoid the shadow, Dodai threw his two kunai at Terra, knowing that as long as a shadow was extended, the root member couldn't move. The kunai met their mark as they pierced Terra in the chest, one where his heart was, before Terra turned into shadows and sank into the ground. What kind of clone was that? Thought Dodai as he kept his guard up for any kind of counter. As if hearing his thoughts, Terra's voice sounded from seemingly everywhere. That was the Nara clan's shadow split technique. It allows us to disconnect our shadow from our bodies, while at the same time forming a clone that is fully capable of using any of our shadow-based jutsu. Dodai tensed at hearing this. That kind of clone could be very dangerous in the right type of environment. From the corner of his eye, Dodai noticed a shadow moving towards him from underneath the tiles of the roof. Tired of playing hide and seek with his opponent, Dodai jumped away from the shadow while forming hand signs. Lava style, rubber rope jutsu, whispered Dodai before he spit out a long piece of rubber from his mouth and held it in his hands. Whipping the rubber rope towards the tiles where the shadow was protruding, Dodai cracked it like a whip, knocking away multiple tiles. Out of a secret hole under the tiles came Terra, who had an eyebrow raised as he examined his opponent's new weapon. So, a lava-style user that uses rubber-based techniques? This makes things a little more interesting, said Terra before he was forced to jump away his spot on the roof as roots and trees began to grow out of the roof. Dodai looked around the new battlefield while mentally cursing to himself. Damn, with this forest, the Nara has more than enough shadows to manipulate. I better be careful, things just got a whole lot more serious. With Sarutobi and Orochimaru, same time. Kukuku, now doesn't this seem familiar, sensei? Said Orochimaru with a twisted smirk on his face as he watched his former sensei's face contort in anger. I always did enjoy a trip down memory lane. Don't you agree, sensei? The only memory that concerns me is wiping yours from the face of this earth, said Sarutobi as he charged his former student, his adamantine staff at the ready. Seeing that his taunting wasn't going to work as well as he hoped it would, Orochimaru spat up a snake, before the snake opened its mouth and regurgitated a sword handle. Grabbing onto the handle, Orochimaru pulled out the legendary grass-long sword, Kusanagi, swinging his legendary blade to meet his sensei's own legendary weapon. The two clashed with a ringing of steel. The two Kage-level shinobi struggled against each other for a few seconds before jumping away from one another and preparing to strike. Again, it was at that moment that an eye appeared on Sarutobi's staff, and Enma's voice sounded from the staff in his hands. "Be careful, Sarutobi. Even in this form, the Kusanagi will still be able to harm me." Sarutobi nodded in understanding before swinging Enma over his back and keeping him in place with chakra. Flipping through hand signs, Sarutobi brought his hand to his mouth after he finished in the tiger sign. Fire style, Fire Dragon Jutsu. A serpentine dragon made of red-hot flames shot from Sarutobi's mouth and charged for the rogue Sannin. Orochimaru stabbed his Kusanagi into the ground beside him and sped through hand signs before ending in the snake sign. Wind style, Vacuum Bullet Jutsu. Bringing his hand to his lips like Sarutobi, Orochimaru launched a bullet of compressed air the size of a horse at the charging fire dragon. When the bullet collided with the dragon, it punched easily through the flames before an explosion rocked through their area of the roof. Taking advantage of the smoke screen created by the explosion, Orochimaru grabbed his Kusanagi and charged towards his former sensei. Sarutobi seemed to have similar thoughts, as the two Kage-level shinobi clashed in the middle of the smoke. They were forced to jump away from each other, however, as roots and trees began to grow all over the roof. Orochimaru smirked as he watched the forest grow around them. Well, Sensei, it looks like that blonde brat you care so much for is as good as dead. You, more than anybody, should know that whenever the first Hokage uses this particular jutsu, his opponents never live to tell the tale. Curse you, Orochimaru, I swear it's the last thing I do. I will kill you, thought Sarutobi before he charged at his former student. With murder in his eyes. With Naruto's clone. Naruto's clone continued to jump through the trees surrounding Konoha as he searched for his next target. Found you, thought the clone before he jumped into a clearing and landed in front of his startled targets. Gaara, said the clone as he watched the surprised Shikaku Jinchuriki with a critical, we need to talk. Gaara, said the clone as he watched the surprised Jinchuriki with a critical, we need to talk. No one moved for what felt like hours, each wrapped up in their own thoughts. Temari was doing her best to keep her face neutral, but inside, she was a nervous wreck. Images of her little brother's altercation with the blonde before them and his team may flash through her mind like an endless cycle. Who the hell is this guy? If he was able to scare Shikaku enough to retreat back inside of Gaara, then what the hell could he do to the three of us? These thoughts continued to play out in her mind as she tried to discreetly prepare for a possible attack. Kankuro was having similar thoughts as his sister, only he wasn't succeeding in keeping up any kind of facade, his fear of the person before him plain for all to see. What the hell could he want with Gaara? Either way, if those two start going at it, I'm getting out of here. Screw the mission. My life is more important than that. Gaara could do little more than stare at his fellow Jinchuriki as his mind flashed back to the events of the tournament. From inside Gaara, Shikaku was shaking in both fear and fury. He was furious that he had been outclassed in power by a mere human. Though said human was also the host of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. That alone was also the reason for his fear. While he may be prideful as one of the 9 Bijou, he was not suicidal, and even the thought of having to face his other fellow Bijou, even Matatabi, who was only a tale stronger than him, filled him with dread. Deciding to break the silence, and finally finding his voice, Gaara spoke in his usual monotone. What is it you want with me? The Naruto clone smiled slightly at finally getting a reaction. I mean, seriously, did mine and Yujito's little display scare them that much? I only wish to talk, but before we begin, I would like you to tell me why it is that Suna, one of the 5 great shinobi nations, would ally itself with someone like Orochimaru to attack Konoha. This threw the Sand siblings for a loop. Of all of the questions they were expecting, that sure as hell wasn't one of them. Though I don't agree with the reasoning behind it, our father, the Yandame Kazakage, said it was a chance to prove to the Wind Daimyo that he should send more funding and missions to Suna instead of Konoha, said Temari, a growing frown on her face as she continued to remember why she and her brothers were forced into this. The clone looked over at Gaara and Kankuro for confirmation and got a nod in response from both of them. I see, started the clone as he gathered his thoughts. Unfortunately, though, this invasion was a failure from the start. Even if you were to succeed and manage to defeat Konoha, it would all be in vain. Your father is dead, killed by Orochimaru's own hand some weeks ago. What? Screamed Temari and Kankuro at the news of their father's death, while Gaara merely raised an eyebrow in surprise. Why would he do something like that? Orochimaru himself came to our village to negotiate the terms of the alliance to attack Konoha. I can't believe it. That backstabbing snake tricked us. Raged Kankuro as his mind came up with some very torturous ways of making Orochimaru pay. Believe it, said Naruto, drawing attention back to him. Orochimaru only desires two things in this world, and they are immortality and to bring Konoha to its knees for, in his mind, betraying him. He doesn't care what lengths he has to go to, who he has to kill, or even what happens to his own men. So long as it means accomplishing his goals, he won't hesitate to do anything he has to. The Naruto clone took a moment to observe all of their reactions to this information, and he wasn't very surprised by their reactions. Temari's expression looked like a mix between sadness and rage. The sadness obviously from losing her father to the likes of Orochimaru, and at the same time feeling rage at what the snake had done and wanting nothing more than to shred him with her fan. Kankuro was very similar to his sister, only minus the sadness. He was furious that Orochimaru would deceive them like this just to exact his revenge on Konoha. He swore that if it was the last thing he did, he would make Orochimaru pay for his treachery. Gaara, on the other hand, just remained impassive about everything. He couldn't say he was really saddened by the news of his father's death because of how the man had treated him when he was younger. Why are you telling us all this anyway? What do you get out of it? Said Temari as she got a hold of her emotions again. This seemed to bring Kankuro out of his dark thoughts of what he planned to do to Orochimaru and also managed to pique Gaara's curiosity as well. The clone nodded in acknowledgement before he answered. Why I'm telling you this is simple really. I want to help you. The Sand siblings couldn't hide their surprise at this statement, but before any of them could respond, the clone continued. I once lived in this village, and like Gaara, I was hated and feared for what I hold. I lost count of how many times I was thrown out of stores and almost every other establishment in this village, all because I was the so-called demon child. However, that wasn't the worst of what I had to endure. Every year on October 10th, my very own birthday, a festival was held to celebrate the defeat of the Kyuubi at the hands of my father, Minato Namikaze. On that same night, almost all of the villagers would get drunk and would form a mob to finish what the Yandame started. Sadly, they succeeded in finding me almost every year, and when they did, they beat me to the point where I have looked the Shinigami in the face only to be rescued at the last possible minute by whatever Umbu was supposed to be guarding me that night. I hate this pathetic village, probably even more so than Orochimaru. This village is nothing to me. I want nothing more than to watch it burn to the ground, but on my terms. I will be the one to decide this village's fate, not some pathetic invasion attempt by a deranged snake. Temari and Kankuro couldn't stop the blood that drained from their faces as they continued to listen to the blonde Kumo shinobi. As the children of the Kazakage, they were treated almost like royalty in Suna. Sure, they had seen how Gaara was treated, but that was only when their father or a personal escort was not with him, and even then it was only harsh whispers and glares. Even though they feared him because of Shikaku, the thought of Gaara having to go through what Naruto did brought a protective fury neither knew they possessed to the forefront of their minds. Gaara continued to stare at his blonde counterpart, showing no outward reaction to what he had just been told. Inside of him, however, was a completely different story. When Naruto had first started his tale, he wasn't moved in the slightest, having experienced much the same thing in Suna. He was just about to interrupt the blonde when he had begun to tell them about the beatings he had to go through that had silenced the redhead quickly. He may have had assassination attempts made on his life before, but they were all unsuccessful and only started to happen when he was about 6 years old. Naruto, it seemed, had experienced far worse treatment at the hands of his former village. And if the look in the blonde's eyes was an indication, then the beatings were probably more frequent than once a year. He knew for certain that if he was forced to go through the same thing, then he would have given into Shikaka long ago and leveled the village for what it did to him. But that thought begged the question, how did you not succumb to your hatred? You mean how did I not end up a crazed, bloodthirsty killer like you, right? Asked Naruto with a chuckle, causing Gaara to frown at the barb. It's actually a rather interesting tale. I told you how I was treated in this village, but one thing I didn't tell you was that on one occasion, a mob of villagers and shinobi beat me so badly that had I not been a Jinchuriki, I would be dead right now. The Sand siblings' eyes widened slightly at that revelation. But I'm actually kind of grateful that they did that now, because if they hadn't, I have no doubt in my mind that I would have turned out just like Gaara did. Grateful? Why the hell are you grateful that they did that? If you're telling the truth, then they might as well have killed you. You said it yourself. If you weren't a Jinchuriki, you would be dead right now, yelled Kankuro. Naruto sent a small glare at the puppeteer for interrupting him, causing said genin to immediately regret what he said. I'm grateful to them, because if they hadn't, I never would have met Kurama. Seeing the confused looks on Temari and Kankuro's faces, he elaborated. Kurama is the true name of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. All traces of color drained from Temari's and Kankuro's faces as the words left the blonde's lips. Since the only experience with Jinchuriki the two had was from their little brother, they had naturally assumed that all Jinchuriki, as well as the other Bijou, were the same as Gaara and Shikaku. That a Jinchuriki could not only talk to their Bijou, but if they were reading between the lines correctly, that said Bijou would willingly help their Jinchuriki was both fascinating and terrifying at the same time. Finally managing to find her voice, Temari broke the silence that enveloped the four genin. Why you don't mean. Naruto nodded his head in the affirmative, already knowing what the blonde Kunoichi was going to ask. Yes, Kurama was the one who helped keep me sane during my time in this village. He helped me train, taught me how to survive on my own, and for that, I am eternally grateful to him. It may seem strange to you, but not all Jinchuriki are bloodthirsty killers, and deep down, neither are you Gaara. Before the Suna genin had a chance to respond, Naruto beat him to it. I understand you more than you realize, Gaara. I know that deep down, you aren't the crazed killer you have made yourself out to be. How can you be certain you are correct? We both may be Jinchuriki, but what makes you think you understand me at all? Asked Gaara, a small trace of surprise and fear lacing his voice. This didn't go unnoticed by the blonde Jinchuriki, who sent a small smile towards the redhead. You aren't the only one who put on a mask to try and protect yourself from the people around you. Gaara's eyes widened in shock as an uncharacteristic intake of breath let Naruto know he had hit the nail on the head. You are not alone in this world, Gaara. Temari and Kankuro may be your siblings by blood, but you also have a brother in me. We may not be related by blood, but we are both Jinchuriki. We both know the pain that comes with that title. It may be painful, Gaara, but you have to take off your mask. If you don't, then sooner or later you will lose yourself to the darkness in your heart. You will become the very thing you hold at bay, the very thing the people of your village believe you to be, a demon. Gaara could do little more than stare at the blonde shinobi across from him. Not only had he been able to see clean through his mask, something even Temari wasn't able to, he had also told him what his own subconscious had been telling him for years. That if he truly wanted to feel alive, to know that his existence meant something, he would have to take off the mask of a psychotic murderer. But what else could he be? He had worn the mask for so long that he had started to forget what was behind it. But maybe, just maybe, Naruto was right. The Naruto clone watched as a multitude of emotions flashed through his fellow Jinchuriki's eyes. He knew how hard it was to take off one's protective mask. He himself had times where his attitude and personality would revert back to his mask of an idiot, but they were becoming less frequent as time passed. You don't have to make a decision now, Gaara. I understand what must be going through your mind right now, so I will leave you to your thoughts. However, I strongly advise you to return to Suna as quickly as possible. If you wish to recover your father's body, it is in a ditch 10 miles out from the West Gate, said the clone as he gave one final nod to the Sand siblings before dispelling in a cloud of smoke. The three Suna Genin stayed in the clearing for several minutes after that, each of them wrapped up in their own thoughts. Surprisingly, Gaara was the first one to come out of his thoughts. Temari, Kankuro, I'm sorry. The two older Genin were taken by surprise at the sudden apology, but quickly remembered what Naruto had said about Gaara's mask. I hope this means I can finally have my little brother back, they thought at the same time before the three Suna Genin took off to the West Gate. With Naruto panted as he leapt off of another branch that had animated itself and started to lash out at him. This had been going on for several minutes. After he had destroyed the Night Aim's water dragon, he had attempted to catch the two Kages off guard with frontal assault, while a shadow clone moved behind the two to trap them in a pincer move. That had been a disastrous failure. The Night Aim had easily sensed the new chakra signature long before the clone had gotten behind them and had made a clone of his own to dispatch Naruto's. With his clone destroyed, Naruto had left himself open to an immediate counter from the Shodai, and he more than capitalized on it. Hashirama unsealed a broadsword from a storage seal on one of his wrist guards and moved to cleave Naruto's head off. It was only thanks a quick substitution that Naruto had barely managed to avoid the attack. But that was when things got even harder. The Shodai stopped attacking directly and instead focused on manipulating the forest around them. Tobirama knew what his brother was planning and had immediately moved to the shadows and occasionally launched a Suiton jutsu at Naruto. Damn it, thought Naruto as he jumped over another water dragon. Hurry, Yujito-chan, I'm almost to my limit. With a quick pulse of chakra, Naruto turned around through an handful of kunai into the shadows. The Night Aim jumped from his hiding place, easily dodging the kunai, even though it wasn't necessary. Naruto collapsed to one knee, his breathing labored as he watched the two brothers in front of him. I must admit, I'm quite impressed with your level of skill at such a young age, said Hashirama, as the forest calmed and returned to its original state. You remind me very much of myself when I was young. The Shodai smiled slightly as he said this, though it seemed strained. However, it seems you have reached your limit. Indeed, said Tobirama, his crossed and his always present neutral expression firmly in place. You seem to possess the same drive as Hashirama, but you have a calculating mind, reminiscent of me during my youth. Despite the situation, Naruto smirked slightly at the compliments. You honor me, Hashirama-sama, Tobirama-sama, but I'm not out of this fight just yet. Tobirama shook his head slightly. It seemed that the blonde before them was more like Hashirama than he thought. Hashirama's smile widened slightly. The strain it took even more pronounced than before. You fought bravely, young shinobi. There is no shame in admitting defeat when you know you cannot win. Sadly, due to the talismans that were implanted into us, our bodies are not our own anymore. The talismans are designed to completely suppress the personality of those brought back with the impure world reincarnation, turning them into no more than mere puppets for the user. However, continued Tobirama, the one that summoned us has greatly underestimated our power. I was the one who originally designed this jutsu and the talismans used to control it. I designed them so that in order to gain complete control over the summoned, the user must be able to use their own power and will to force the summoned to submit to them. While this person is indeed powerful, they are not able to completely control us. I see, mumbled Naruto, his mind already going into overdrive. So while he is able to control your bodies, he cannot completely suppress your personalities. That explains why you two seem to be fighting against yourselves during our battle. as well as the effort you're having to put into keeping that smile on your face, Hashirama-sama. He does indeed have the same analytical mind as you. Tobarama, said Hashirama with a chuckle. So it would seem, said Tobarama with a small, almost unnoticeable smile gracing his lips. The smile immediately vanished as his body suddenly started to run towards the downed blonde, a ninjato appearing from a seal on his armor. It seems this is the end, young one. For its worth, I'm sorry, said Tobarama as he brought his sword back, ready to swing. Hope this works, thought Naruto as he reached inside his blood-red cloak and unsealed his newest weapon. The night-aim sword was mere inches from Naruto's neck when a blade of pure lightning appeared and blocked the strike. It didn't stop there, however. The legendary blade cut clean through the sword with ease. Tobarama, surprised at the sight of his former weapon being used against him, wasn't able to stop himself in time to avoid the blade. Seizing the opening, Naruto swung the Raijin at the night-aim, completely bisecting his reincarnated body. Jumping away from the night-aim, Naruto watched as the former Hokage's body began to regenerate itself again. Damn it, looks like I was wrong. Even though the bodies seem to be made from some type of earth-based substance, lightning doesn't have the same effect of neutralizing them like it does Doton techniques, thought Naruto as he began to ready himself for another attack. Before he could move to attack, his eyes widened as he received the memories from two of his clones, the one who talked to Gaara and one of the ones he sent to guard Yujito. All right, time to end this, he thought before he deactivated the Raijin and held the handle in between his hands as he formed hand signs. Ending with the ram seal, Naruto jumped from his position on a branch, activating the Raijin as he fell back to the roof. Flipping the Raijin into a reverse grip, Naruto used both hands to stab the blade halfway into the roof as he landed. Raijin no Ken, Imperial Field of the Thunder God. The roof began to shake slightly, instantly putting Hashirama and the newly regenerated Tobarama on guard. Instantly, multiple spikes of pure lightning rose from the ground, impaling the brothers in various points along their bodies. However, unlike most techniques that involve the use of lightning, this one didn't dissipate after it was completed. Instead, the lightning spikes stayed in place, suspending the two brothers a few feet from the ground. Very impressive technique you have here, said Hashirama, his reincarnated corpse twitching every so often with the lightning running through it. But I'm curious, how is it that you came to have the Raijin in your possession? The last I saw of it before my death was when Tobarama still wielded it. It seemed Tobarama wanted to know the same thing, if the pointed stare he was giving Naruto was any indication. Yes, said the night-aim in his normal monotone, though his voice held a slight growl to it. How did you come to own my sword? Your sword, growled Naruto from his kneeling position. This sword was never yours. You're nothing but a thief who stole it from my clan, the Uzumaki clan. You're an Uzumaki? Asked the Shodai, surprise evident in his voice. Yes, my name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. I am the last surviving member of both the Uzumaki and Namikaze clans, and as is my birthright, I have reclaimed the Raijin in the name of my ancestors. But wait, if you're an Uzumaki, then that means... Hashirama's voice trailed off as he continued to stare at Naruto, almost as if he was searching for something. Yes, I am your distant grandson Hashirama-sama, and your distant grandnephew Tobarama-sama. Though I still do not know for certain the lineage that leads my line back to the boy you and Mito-sama adopted, I do know for certain you two are my family, if only in name. With the rakage. This guy is really starting to annoy me, thought A as he dodged another fist the size of a horse. Ever since the forest had been created on the roof, it had been forced onto the defensive. While he may have been far faster and more than likely physically stronger than his opponent, the environment they found themselves in was not to his advantage. His superior speed was all but useless in the dense forest, only helping him to dodge Dajimas in large appendages. While he could have easily smashed his way through the thick forest around him and gotten to his enemy, and he was seriously considering doing just that, Years of dealing with Naruto's pranks had taught him that smashing through things recklessly was not in his best interest. Sidestepping yet another fist the size of his body, it capitalized on his position by grabbing onto the fist with both hands and pulled on it with all his strength. Dajimo didn't have time to react as he was forcibly pulled from his spot in the shadows, only to be met with a lightning-infused elbow. "Elbow!" screamed as his arm made contact with the airborne root umbu. With a satisfying crunch, Dajimo was launched into one of the many trees surrounding them, seemingly unconscious. Just as they was about to move to deliver the final blow, Dajimo jumped up into the canopy above them. "It seems I underestimated you. You seem to possess some level of skill," said Dajimo, his voice echoing throughout the small clearing. "But it's time to end this little skirmish." Braced himself, preparing for whatever his enemy had planned. Katon, blazing human bullet impact. The flaming form of Dajimo, under the effects of his clan's multi-sized jutsu, began falling towards A, intent on obliterating the wreckage. I had other ideas, though, as he brazenly jumped up to meet the flaming human head-on. With a quick pulse of chakra, several protrusions appeared along A's right vambrace. Focusing most of his Raiton armor's power to his arm, he used his left hand to brace his right shoulder as he made contact with the root umbu. "Lariat!" roared A as he launched Dajimo's flaming form back into the air, watching with satisfaction as the umbu crashed into the top of the barrier. His attention was immediately drawn from his opponent writhing on the ground as the flames from the barrier burned, to a strong pulse of Matatabi's chakra coming from where he had last seen the two blonde genin. Crap, if they used their Biju's chakra against the Shodai. He trailed off as he immediately launched himself deeper into the forest, not wanting to imagine what might happen. "Hang in there, Naruto, Yujito, I'm on my way." With B. Unlike his brother, B had been completely on the offensive against his opponent. His unorthodox style of fighting made it nearly impossible for Terai to counter, but that didn't mean the root umbu was going to go down easy. For longer than any other person, other than A, had been able to, Terai had managed to avoid most of B's attempts at finishing him, though he did receive his fair share of cuts and gashes. "Man, this guy is good," thought B as he continued to use his seven swords dance to attack the rogue umbu. Terai jumped behind a root, hoping that to buy himself a few moments to gather his thoughts. Unfortunately for him, B had other plans. Charging his lightning chakra into his swords, B used his human buzz saw to shred the tree into splinters. Terai had just enough time to substitute himself with a log before he was shredded by B's swords. "Okay, no playing around. It's time to end this bastard once and for all." Stopping his spinning, B threw his swords into the air and did some aerobatics to catch each of them in their respective sheaths. "All right, Gyuki, time to release the bull." "You gotta put this guy down and go help Naruto and Yujito," said Gyuki as B drew on his 10-inch chakra. A shroud of red chakra enveloped the Hachibi Jinchuriki, taking on the form of a bull with a single tail swinging behind him. Terai only had a moment to think before he was forced to duck. Barely a second later, B's chakra-coated arm smashed through the tree behind him. He wasn't fast enough to dodge B's follow-up, though, as the chakra tail batted the Inazuka away. Terai struggled to his feet. He may have been tough and able to brush off most hits and not show a reaction, but even he couldn't ignore the pain of coming into direct contact with a Biju's chakra. His moment of weakness would cost him, though, as B suddenly appeared next to him, his arm extended once again. "Lariat," said B, his voice taking on a demonic edge as his arm rammed into Terai's neck, effectively blowing the man's head off his shoulders. He didn't stick around to admire his handiwork, however, as he instantly sped through the forest towards where he sensed Naruto and Yujito. With Dodai. If anybody had been watching the fight between the two shinobi, they could have easily mistaken it for a game of shogi. The two shinobi realized early on that they were almost equals in terms of skill and ability. In the end, they knew that the winner would be the one who could outthink the other. While there may have been little actual combat between the two, a fierce battle was being waged as both strategists pitted their minds against one another. With the added shadows from the forest surrounding them, Tara had immediately fallen back into the dense foliage and attempted to trap Dodai with his multitude of shadow techniques. Dodai proved himself to be deserving of his place among his fellow shinobi, as he avoided being ensnared in the famed shadow jutsu of the Nara, despite the environment being almost completely covered in shadows. Dodai had forced Tara to reveal himself on more than one occasion with clever application of his mud clones and yotan, rubber rope. Tara likewise had used his shadow split technique to great use, almost capturing Dodai and forcing the man to dodge multiple shadows at once. But no matter how they tried to get an upper hand in the battle, the other always had an answer for them. Dodai jumped into the air, avoiding another attempt from Tara to trap him in a shadow. Swinging his rubber rope in the direction he saw the shadow retreating, Dodai watched as Tara once again jumped to a different hiding place to strike from. Forming two more rubber ropes in his hands, Dodai swung them in the direction he saw his enemy retreat, only to watch again as he blurred away to a different location. Time to lure him out into the open, thought Dodai as he flashed through a chain of seals, ending in the tiger's seal, Katan, flame whirlwind. Fire surrounded Dodai as it began to swirl around him. Pushing his hands forward, Dodai launched the swirling tunnel of fire at the forest in front of him. Spinning on his heel, the Yotan user used his extensive training in nature manipulation to guide the tunnel of fire so that it set all of the trees around him ablaze. His plan seemed to work as Tara jumped down from his burning tree and moved to strike Dodai with his flat-tipped tanto. However, before Tara managed to get within striking distance, multiple rubber ropes appeared from the burning forest and wrapped themselves around various points on Tara's body, trapping him. Tara couldn't hide his surprise as he now found himself at Dodai's mercy. How? Dodai smirked at his trapped enemy as he pulled out a kunai from his pouch. My rubber ropes are very durable, able to withstand multiple impacts, cause significant damage with a single strike, and hold extreme weights without breaking. During our battle, I was constantly creating and throwing away multiple ropes, despite their durability. That still doesn't explain, began Tara before his eyes widened in realization. You had clones inside of the ropes, didn't you? Not quite, said Dodai. Each of the ropes I created was the real deal. However, I have trained to such an extreme in nature transformation that I can freely manipulate any of my rubber, even if I'm not in direct contact with it. I simply used the discarded ropes to form rubber clones, and had them position themselves to trap you the moment you were in the open. Tara remained silent for a second before he closed his eyes, silently admitting his defeat. Dodai didn't waste another second. He drove his kunai into Tara's neck, instantly killing the man. His opponent taken care of, Dodai used a pulse of chakra to locate Naruto and Yujito before launching himself in their direction, hoping it wasn't too late. Back with Naruto. You my grandson? Asked Hashirama, his disbelief apparent in his wide eyes. Tobarama wasn't faring much better than his brother at concealing his shock. While the boy he was fighting wasn't from his direct line, or his brothers for that matter, he was still being forced to fight a member of his family. Yes, Hashirama-sama, said Naruto, rising from crouch position, though he left the Raijin in the ground. Though, as I said, I do not know the line that leads mine back to the boy you and Mito-sama adopted. The only reason I know you two are my family is because Mito-sama left a letter inside of an Uzumaki chest. Actually, I was hoping you could tell me a little more about my heritage before you were returned to place you came. Mito-sama didn't even mention the name of my ancestor in her letter. Of course, said Hashirama, a heartwarming smile crossing his lips, the effort from before nowhere to be seen. Since Mito-chan was never able to sire children of her own, we were more than happy to adopt the last of Mito's clan into our family. Young Kaido Uzumaki was no more than 6 when he came into our family, but despite that, he still treated Mito-chan, Tobarama, I and every other member of our clan like his family. I would tell you more about him, but my time here is short, so I will tell you of your family. Kaido married a young woman by the name of Rina Terumi. She hailed from Kirigakure, but moved to Konoha to be with Kaido. Terumi? As in the Terumi clan of Kirigakure, known for their dual Kekiai, Gunkai's Yotan, and Futten, said a surprised Naruto, who would have thought that his family line was comprised of so many well-known clans. Yes, said Hashirama, his smile never once wavering. Kaido and Rina sired 2 lovely daughters together, Tsunade and Mei. The 2 of them were always competitive with each other, each trying to outdo the other. When the girls began the academy, they were given the choice of which of their clan names they wished to take. Tsunade, wanting to honor both myself and Tobarama, took on the Senju name, while Mei, who was almost a carbon copy of Rina, took on the Terumi name. That is all I can tell you. I died shortly after the girls started the academy. Naruto was silent for a moment, mentally branding the names of his family members into his skull. He swore that even if it was the last thing he did, he would find a way to help reunite his broken family. Thank you, Hashirama-sama. You have no idea how much this information means to me. You're welcome, young one. Naruto smiled at the Trap brothers. Now all that I need to do is find a few missing links in my family tree and help reunite our broken family. You will succeed, said Tobarama, speaking for the first time since discovering his grandnephew's existence. You are the descendant of the Shodai and Naidame Hokages. I know you will succeed in anything you set your mind to, just as we did all of those years ago. A lone tear fell from Naruto's eyes as he looked at his grandfather and granduncle for what could possibly the last time. Thank you, Tobaramajiji. I'll make you and Hashiramajiji proud. With one last smile towards his ancestors, Naruto jumped back a little, now Yujito-chan. From the surrounding forest, Yujito appeared in front of Naruto, her hands glowing with dark blue fire. With a small smile of gratitude towards the 2 legendary shinobi, Yujito swung her hands out in an arc, launching a blade of blue flames at the reincarnated men. Nico style, Reaper Soul Blade. As the blade of fire passed through the 2 brothers, the bodies trembled slightly before crumbling back into dust, revealing the corpses used as sacrifices. However, floating over the piles of ash and dust were the spirits of Hashirama and Tobarama. Hashirama seemed confused as to why his spirit had been released yet hadn't passed on. Naruto saw the confusion being reflected in his ancestor's eyes, and with a sigh pulled out a scroll from inside his jacket. The scroll was completely black. No writing was visible on the surface. With a flick of his wrist, Naruto opened the scroll to reveal a complex sealing array, with multiple circles along the inside of the scroll. The Jutsu Yujito-chan, used to release your souls from the bindings of the reincarnation, is designed so that when the target's soul has been released, it will remain in this world until it is sealed within something. In this case, we will be sealing you 2 inside this scroll, preventing anyone like Orochimaru from summoning you again. Tobarama merely nodded, while Hashirama gave his descendant a warm smile. You 2 are quite the tag team. I know you will become excellent ninja one day. But Naruto, you need not be sad. You are merely doing what is best for everyone involved. Know that I am proud of you, and even though I shall be sealed away, I will always be watching over you. As will I, said Tobarama, as the 2 brothers watched Naruto prepare for the sealing. With a quick flurry of hand seals, Naruto slammed his hand onto the scroll in front of him. Fuinjutsu, Path of the Pure World. As the words left past his lips, the first 2 circles on the scroll began to glow a brilliant yellow. As the chakra from the scroll began to suck the ghostly forms of Hashirama and Tobarama away, Naruto noticed that the other 3 Kumo, shinobi in the barrier had arrived. Once the sealing was complete, Naruto rolled the scroll back up, before placing the scroll inside his jacket. You're a little late. The fun's already over, said Naruto with a small laugh. before he schooled his features. What about that senile old man? Don't forget we need to make sure he survives this encounter. Despite how badly I want him dead, he is of more use alive than he is dead. I have no idea. After you and Yujito separated to take on the Shodai and Night Aim, we were all forced to split up and handle one of the route Umbu Orochimaru had with him, said B as he stopped using Gyuki's chakra, allowing his shroud to fade. I still don't see why we have to make sure the old Hokage lives through this, but I'll trust your judgment, Naruto, said A, his Raitan armor dissipating as well. Thanks, Reikage-sama. I'll explain every again once this over, but for now, we have a snake to eliminate. The other 4 Kumo ninja nodded in agreement with Naruto before all 5 of them shot of towards the location Sarutobi and Orochimaru's chakras could be felt.
That's it for today. Remember to show your support to the creator of this story if you enjoyed it. If you would like more parts of the story to be uploaded, leave a comment and subscribe to get notified when the story continues. Bye-bye for now, and I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day.